bist du sie aller Ehre. Was ist Wundes hier geschehen? Dass ein Magd ein Kind gebar, ihre über aller Engel Schar. Was das nicht ein Wunder gab. Hier ließ sich reine Taufe.
This is The New Right, a podcast for the lost arts, reclaiming the literary holy land from the heathen. This is Dan Baltic.
And this is Matt Pegas.
And this is episode 35. And on this episode, despair is prohibited because we are here with the man, the legend, Stained Haynes.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Thanks for having me on.
It is great to have you here, Haynes. And so I mean, a little bit about you. Many people already know you, but you are the founder and creator of 718 TV, which is a kind of hybrid apparel poster company that produces kind of like visual and wearable content throughout New York City and beyond.
Yes.
And Cars and Women magazine, which is a very cool DIY type of zine. I have multiple copies here that Haynes has personally given me, so I'm very thankful for that. Super Predator magazine, and in general, you are a man about town in New York City, and we have run into each other at Fed Fest. That's where we met.
Right.
And 2 nights ago at the expat reading.
Right.
And
which is appropriate because you're Brooklyn trash and I'm Queens trash. So
exactly.
like trash meets trash. A huntsman always recognizes another huntsman in the woods.
Exactly.
So kind of like serendipitously, we end up we've crossed paths. FedFest in particular was funny because I had less than zero idea of what I was going into. I usually bring copies of the zine and some shirts because I know I'm going to meet some mutuals and soon to be homies. And like, hey, I am that dork in the luchador mask making a mess of this city, because I don't want to freak people out and just show up with a mask and like 4 large pies. No, like I want to I want to enjoy live shit like a normal human being, So I meet you. I didn't know if it was BYOB, but I remember pouring you a glass of vodka that could have stunned a mule because I didn't know how long we were going to be up there. I didn't know what was happening, but no, a man about town insofar as now you got to do things online to get things shaking in meat space,
Absolutely. And that was a powerful pour. Like after that, I remember I was talking with Pill Eater and the roof started spinning. And I was like, it's time to exit stage left before things get hairy for Dan up here on the roof. But it was great to meet you at Fed Fest. And continuing to hang out at these other events. And
it is it is kind of wild how small of a world it is because you could shadow box on Twitter for as long as you'd like. And you could have first of all, there's a difference between followers and a following. All right. And you could get really good at shadow boxing on Twitter and have like fuck all to show for it outside the screen, So there comes a point where the overlap of online and meat space, if you want to do anything meaningful or enact anything proactive, like you have to go like offline. And I'm really glad that there are these events here in the city that can even be conductive to such a thing, like the expat reading a couple of days ago. Like that was all sorts of pleasant, and even my old cranky ass, and I want to be like people online are crazy, back in my day, no one used their real name on the internet. This is crazy. And then meeting people like you, and then getting to meet poetry grifter Steph, like getting to meet
Absolutely.
people who I've interacted with online, and then I could put a face and a voice to a name. And it's kind of cool because now I read all your tweets in your voice, and like Matt, like until time immemorial, if there's Twitter in fucking heaven, I'm reading your tweets in your voice, buddy.
Yeah.
I don't make the rules.
No, absolutely. I mean, it kind of seems like the the fusion of meat space and online has always been part of what you do, Stain. Would you say that's accurate? Like you from the very start you've been tweeting, but also making kind of like almost like shit posting in real life, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that is exactly what it is. It's shit posting in meat space.
Yeah.
It's somewhere. All right, so the flyers and the stickers are somewhere between like DIY psyops and shit posting in meat space. It's somewhere in between those two. So I got on Twitter because I figured, all right, like Shepard Fairey fucking spammed cities with Obey, and Andre the Giant has a posse. It took him like 15 years, but he eventually became like a sort of household name.
Mm-hmm.
Did the Obama Hope poster and cashed out. And like, I don't blame him, but I don't got 15 years. However, now the first and last arbiter of most things, if not all, is now the internet. So if what someone says has weight or merit or substance, even things like semantics, like takes like it plays second fiddle to that. So I feel like with the flyers, some of them you could just remove the text and you know what the hell's going on. Like the writing with the
Absolutely.
spare prohibited flyer. That's my favorite one. That's like watching
Mine
a
too.
telenovela, not knowing Spanish and still understanding what's happening. But like the image version of that. So
Mm-hmm.
no, like very very astute point, Matt. I've been calling it shit posting in meat space since like day one, and people look at me like a fucking dog that gets shown a card trick.
So just to give people a kind of sense of what you do, you are going around the city putting up flyers, sticking them on walls, on kind of buildings and spaces, which are images of the t-shirts you also sell, which are these kind of like, well, one of them, the one that I like the most, the t-shirt you gave me the other night, is Riding with Despair Prohibited. And this is a picture of a kind of like stick man on the subway holding his head, and there's like a big cross over that, and at
Yeah.
the bottom it says keep hopes up. And so you are going around the city putting up flyers like this, putting up flyers that it's interesting to me that people are kind of have a sense of like we've talked, we know that you're kind of the right, as are we, but there's an intuitive sense that these are like dissident posters, these are right coded posters, and it's like it's weird because it shouldn't really be that, like Riding
Oh
with
right.
Despair Prohibited, keep
Oh,
hopes up.
I
That
mean,
should be a universal message, really.
yeah. I mean, there's a story behind that flyer in particular, but I'm glad you bring up a good point about what these things are called, because in my opinion, I think a lot of things get labeled as dissident or even right wing because for some people, the only way others could possibly disagree with them and their worldview, which they presuppose is the default worldview, has to come from quote unquote the other side. All right. Like I've never made any explicit political messages or statements in my stuff other than class and the fact that I just really fucking hate liberals. Like I have a bone to pick with them because like, all right, like I'm the child of immigrants. I'm Queens trash. Like dad's from Greece, mom's from Ecuador. My brother and I are first generation American. So I remember having to like, sometimes like translate for mom in the parent teacher conference. And, you know, only a particular kind of population, whenever talking to immigrants or people darker than them, they talk to them like they're pants on head retarded eating rubber cement. Like the way people can be really cruel when talking to someone in like a wheelchair or in
Yeah.
crutches, like talking at them instead of talking to them. I grew up seeing that, like watching people talk to my mom like she was some fucking like five-headed ogre you had to make nice with when she's this like tiny 5'1" lady. with like the heaviest like accent in the world. So so no,
Yeah,
I find it fascinating how there are a number of people who find ourselves in a weird particular corner. It's not as nebulous as it seems, like on the outside at times, because online can seem like it stretches forever. But I think a lot of people get labeled this just because, I think we have to come to terms with there's a population of people who will never convince we're right or even they're wrong because
absolutely.
and I think what you guys are doing is a perfect example of like, say what you will about Terrence McKenna, go out and start your own road show. There's no point in consuming culture manufactured from the bones of a dying world, you know? So
Absolutely.
so like it could come in many forms. Like, hey, the good and the bad news is that like it's all in your hands. And I will say the people who label others as dissident and right wing in a pejorative way, these cocksuckers don't make. These are just fucking like talentless pricks who, even if they do have talent, they spend it snobbishly tearing down the works of others. Because like leftist literature, progressive anything, it's fucking hogwash and it's uninspired, self-indulgent tripe. Nothing worthwhile or meaningful has come from it in a substantial sort of way that isn't inflated by Twitter numbers and metrics and bots. And that's the only way you can convince people it's real because that fucking website is perfected. Everything you see here is true and everything you don't isn't. But I digress. But no, like politics is a really weird angle when it comes to this because I think there's enough overlap for, never in my life would I ever think like a neo-Confederate, a Zionist, and a black nationalist could all sit at the same table and be like, "Let me tell you about the Federal Reserve, man," or like,
Absolutely.
what they're teaching my kids in school, you know, and that isn't explicitly right wing or dissident, is it? You know, but
No, yeah.
but
I mean,
from
it's like
people,
that trope that, the racists are the inclusive ones. And like there is an element of truth to that. It's you know, it's kind of like we were, I mean, this is later in the notes, but that there's a kind of difference if you grew up, and I'm a native New Yorker, you're a native New Yorker, you grow up around other cultures, and you learn to appreciate their eccentricities. You learn to appreciate other people for their interesting backgrounds. And
right?
there's a real difference between that type of like appreciation of other cultures and the kind of woke diversity is a virtue mindset. Wouldn't you say,
Yeah,
Nate?
that's a very good point. I mean, like I don't want to skip too far ahead, but I would like to comment on how like, all right, no, this is like it's not so much an open secret because like I imagine it works the same way in Brooklyn, sans the hyper gentrified parts. All right, but like first of all, Queens is the most ethnically diverse county in the United States. And one of the reasons it works, if not the reason it works, is because once people show up here, they self segregate. So, like, if you take the 7 line, yeah, you have like the Latin American consulate for a while, but then even then, like the Mexicans segregate with themselves, so do the Peruvians, the Uruguayans, the 4 Argentinians have their own block, you know? So, I would argue every corner of the earth that comes to Queens does that.
Mhm.
So, um, everyone sticks to their own up until I don't want to say out of necessity. I mean, like, I think one because like all right. So the comparison you made. Remember when there were people who like equated diversity to just nothing but like music and food and the cool things about their cultures, and no one
Yeah,
talks about how like hey like Indians who come to Queens like maintain that caste system bullshit. So like
yeah.
even if like some delete makes it and he's like fucking rolling it big and this guy's unstoppable, like there are people who will cross the street and he's like, oh no, he's an untouchable. Fuck that guy. I used to have 20 people wash my ass back in India who look just like him. Fuck that guy. That's happening right now in Jackson Heights.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I think diversity as a lived experience is worlds apart from like fucking Oregon Trail pioneers who show up to like you know Williamsburg in the early 2000s and then like and all their talk of diversity and shit And then like 16, 17 years later, like they're at a town hall meeting. They're being told to shut up because they're so angry that the spawn of the people they're pushing out has to sit next to their precious artifact children in school. Circle of life, man. That's diversity for you. Dan, I'm sorry to hear what happens to your borough, but dude, like there's something wrong with Brooklyn. Okay, fellas, Matt,
Hmm.
Dan, I can't prove this, but I believe this to be true. All right. In the early 2000s, whoever was in charge of gentrifying Brooklyn, they figured it out so well that they then copied and pasted it and used it elsewhere. Like what happened with Williamsburg. Okay. They copied and then they pasted it and they figured out how to fine tune it to the idiosyncrasies of wherever it's like control V into. All right. Because
100%.
because like once upon a time in Williamsburg, it was nothing but like empty lots, abandoned warehouses, the waterfront, and like a really weird Gaza strip of like Bloods and Crips and Hasidic Jews. It was this weird, barren, desolate, like hell blasted scape.
Oh,
That
totally.
like, but
Hispanics, a lot of,
yeah.
Dominicans, Puerto Ricans, like it was, it was a dangerous hood. My
However,
Yeah,
However,
go on.
some of them lived in these gorgeous buildings that offended common sense as to why they would even be there in the first place. Like, long story short, I meet someone through the internet, and this was back when meeting people online were weird. It was just like, "Yo, bro, you're mad good at Counter Strike." He's like, "Yo, what's up, G? Like, you were talking about the Mets earlier. You from here?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm from here. Where you from?" And he's like, "Yo, pull through in Williamsburg. We'll hang out." I'm like, "I bet." And I go, and it kind of looked like, all right, a rap video is about to start in three, two, one. It was not. It was not. Oh no 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 no. So and it turns out he gets grandfathered into this building that has like at the time the highest ceilings I've ever seen in my life. These were what I learned were pre-war buildings, and and I always wondered to what degree that was part of the impetus to snatch up Brooklyn, but but my homie had a front row seat to seeing the neighborhood get like gentrified, but like speed running gentrification. And like gentrification has hit every corner of New York City, even the fucking Bronx, which is weird. Because even up on Fordham Road, you'll see like a white couple, and you're like, "Oh God, are they lost? Like, what are they doing here?" But but no, Dan, what the hell happened to your borough, man? Like, this isn't me treating like Brooklyn like it's Shelbyville, but I kind of can, and you could totally
Well,
treat Queens like some
here's
dirty palette swap of your
here's the
borough.
thing. Brooklyn is divided, right? So Williamsburg, Park Slope, I'm not going to fully dox, but I live in one of those gentrified areas. And yeah, Park Slope has been gentrified since for forever. I mean, like 40, 50 years ago, Williamsburg more recently. And, lots of yuppies, lots of libs, what have you. This process has played out, but Bay Ridge, Bensonhurst, South Brooklyn,
Right.
Green Park, they are holdouts. They are not going to be gentrified anytime soon. And the interesting thing is, not to get too into the racial politics of this, but minority neighborhoods, obviously they are, probably because of lower property values. That's part of it. They are
Just
more
say
easily
black.
gentrified.
Just say
Yeah,
black and Latino. You're not running
yeah,
for
black
office.
and
Come
Latino.
on,
No,
man.
black and we are the new right.
No,
Black
so
and
what do you?
Latino
No. What are you saying?
neighborhoods.
Minorities, like okay, it's like 20% Sri Lankan. There are three dudes from Nepal,
No,
a legion
fair.
of
Yeah.
Guatemalans. What are we talking here, Dan? Come on.
But okay, so Bay Ridge, Bensonhurst, like Brooklyn Italian, and like now, okay, there's Asians, there's Russians, there's Arabs down there, but these neighborhoods are not going to. I don't see libs gentrifying Bay Ridge. I don't see
Mhm.
libs gentrifying Bensonhurst anytime soon, despite the fact that we know some people kind of in the New York scene or whatever who live in South Brooklyn, but I wouldn't exactly say that they're the vanguard of the gentrification force.
Oh no, no. I think, and maybe it's because it has always been the first and eternal bone I have to pick. Because it's impossible to discuss gentrification without discussing like class and like what it does to a neighborhood, and specifically like the population of people it brings, and then before you know it, there are these like weird um there are these businesses that don't cater to the locals and the natives. And it's like, first of all, who the fuck is going there for organic dry cleaning? What the fuck is that all about? It's so jarring to just like walk by something occasionally that you've taken it for granted, even though it's been in your backyard for decades. And then one day there was a period in like the late 2000s, early 2010s where it's like, now it's a frozen yogurt place. I didn't get the memo. You know, like I didn't get the memo for a lot of things. Like Crown Heights used to be synonymous with like, what are you doing in Crown Heights? And now there's this like weird Iraq War green zone and then the hood.
Oh
Like,
yeah, 100%. Like I have an interesting story about this. Back in like 2009, I was, I graduated college. I'm a native New Yorker, but a lot of my friends from college moved to New York anyways. And so I was at a party in Crown Heights, got really wasted, and I remember leaving with my then girlfriend. And like I was, she was a lot more sober than I was, and I was like trying to get a cab or something. It was pre-Uber, and I don't even remember this, but my girlfriend then told me that this black woman came up to me and she said something like, "White boys like you should not be this drunk in this neighborhood." And that was good advice. That was very good advice.
is she wrong?
And I didn't do it again.
Is she wrong? I'm just saying. Is she wrong?
Oh no, she's not wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, like she was quite right, and I consider myself, somewhat lucky that night that it didn't end poorly.
You were given the mercy that could only come from like a DMV TSA worker.
Pretty much, yeah.
Right, yeah.
She was my guardian angel.
That's funny though, because
I don't mean my girlfriend.
Yeah. I don't have as much to add to this because I'm not a native New Yorker, but I've spent plenty of time in Brooklyn. I remember after college, several of my friends moved to Crown Heights. So there you go. Like for my kind of later millennial perspective is like, yeah, that's yet another place in Brooklyn that people move. It's like after Williamsburg was totally, gentrified to the point of being prohibitively expensive. Now it's all these other places. Like I guess, what is it? Bushwick now is pretty much.
Oh yeah, Bushwick
spot.
Is it's been a hot spot, but insofar as it's sort of like I don't want to on a technical level, it's like Williamsburg adjacent because it's like, hey, here's Hood, here's Bodega, and then here are these beautiful stretches of like fucking someone played Simtown decades ago and really knew what they were doing, and then we're back in the hood. Like there are weird stretches of that, like not only in Brooklyn but like in Queens. Like go to fucking Gun Hill Road and you'll see some of the most beautiful pre-war buildings like in the city. But at the same time, like it's the fucking Bronx. Like, so it's weird how like, all right, so you're out in Los Angeles, right?
I am, yeah.
All right. So I imagine like street art over there, if I had to make a guess, it tends to be synonymous with like a bunch of locals and tourists wanting to take a selfie in front of a mural, or like.
So there's two, and this is probably like in New York City too. There's two types. There's that type you're describing. There's a lot of like, I mean, in LA, probably New York too, but in LA especially, it's like overdone. Where there's like that moment where Banksy got really popular, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, he's a street artist, and this is street art, and you can take a selfie with it for Instagram. Like it's not graffiti. It's it's this classy thing. There's lots of that in LA, and a lot of it is kind of cringe, and I like a lot of it is like very like. I mean, there's nothing wrong with like a feel good message, obviously. No riding with despair. Sorry, despair prohibited while riding. That's a feel good message of its own. So I'm not saying it's bad if it's a feel good message, but in LA, it's like I think the thing that comes to mind is like there's these angel wings, and it's like you're an angel and you take a picture. Hey, look, I'm not trying to knock it too hard. It is what it is, but I just.
Oh no! That is just an insert yourself to tell people you're a good person or a better person by virtue of it. Like, I don't know if anyone here remembers or like, remember that period where taking a picture of yourself with the program to Hamilton meant you were a good person?
Yeah.
Like,
yes.
Right.
Definitely.
So there's also this like the tourism, voyeurism, like, atrocity tourism aspect to it of like, hey, like, first of all, let's talk about how vacation is like fucking It is one of the most expensive hobbies some people can have, and some people mistake it for like a fucking personality. And I've been fortunate to leave the state and country a few times, but like there are people right now who are in LA getting pictures of them fucking wings, so it could be on the 3x3 grid through like a dinky lens and a gaudy filter, so they can let other people know. Like it ends up becoming this like weird normie touchstone.
Oh yeah,
Like
no, I've really been struck by the degree to which that kind of quote unquote street art has become a normie touchstone. I mean, I feel like I kind of remember, and you know, as a street artist, I'm curious what you'll say about this. I kind of remember when it happened. I think I remember like around about 2009, 2010. Now I was very young, so maybe I was naive, but I had this impression like Banksy, who's obviously one of the most famous people here, like was kind of you know, dissident. Like he was doing art that was supposedly edgy, and then like there was that documentary that came out about him. So, like before too long, it was like, yeah, this normie touchstone where everyone was all into Banksy and had this screen prints, and you know, it basically just lost its edge entirely over the course of the 2010s. Was that kind of your impression of that kind of?
Yeah.
With the guy you mentioned earlier too, the Obey guy, and again, not trying to necessarily diss these people. It just the degree to which something that was like ooh edgy, and now it's like just such a cliche thing, like I like urbanite starter pack type thing. I don't know. Yeah.
No. This is a very, very good point because all right, so this I don't, to the degree of which this has happened in art is beyond my understanding, but take like graffiti in the late 70s and early 80s in New York City. So, first of all, if you see the art world as like a commerce establishment, I guess it makes a little better sense because how come from this ocean of talent, some people whose works still adorn my city, how come these people were not selected? But it was like Keith Haring, Basquiat, and like one other person. So then like these people are elevated to where like one, it dispels the notion that like first of all the ability to create art is inherent in all of us. But then things that start off with teeth and with bloodlust, like what you said with like a Bansky, like fucking breaking into Disney World and leaving murals and bouncing, and it was like critical of like you know the treatment of the workers and things like that. That was ballsy. That was incredibly daring, really. And then it sort of builds this myth where like, dude, there's no way one person, it's just Bansky, because then like because it almost felt like not like a supervillain, but like fucking Puck from Shakespeare. You wake up tomorrow and then on the Gaza Strip, hey, Bansky left a mural criticizing both sides. Hey, like both sides feel bad today. Hey, you know?
Yeah, and, no, totally. And he became like this. Yeah, they're that annoying. Is that how you say it, Bansky? But anyway, I'm trying to articulate something here.
Banksy, I don't like. I mean, but just like real Banksy, quickly, but like not. I never liked how there came a point where okay, so during the Charlie Hebdo attacks, he posted something on Twitter that was something to the effect of like collectivize and you know like to respond with art, but he was addressing the public as if or whoever was in charge of this Twitter account was addressing the public as if they were separate and platonically coexisting with the public. Like you're not like why the public which consumes his art and gives him the praise and pays his mortgage and does all these other things and he's speaking not to them but like of them. You know what I mean? Almost like you know how liberals used to talk to my fucking mom at like parent teacher night.
Oh no, totally. It's weird. Like I'm not a conspiracy theorist on this. It's like he got kind of adopted by the powers that be in a weird way to like be a priestly like purveyor of morality, and you know that I kind of could tell when that happened, and it was weird. Like all of a sudden, it's like what's supposed to be the most dissident thing, street art, you know, making art where you're not supposed to, etc. got kind of co-opted in this really like transparently cynical way by powers that be to like hello fellow children or whatever like this and like but like spreading like a very basic very basic like kind of centrist pro-establishment type of message. Well, not exactly pro-establishment but sort of like
no
to
Yeah.
the co-opting that went on, as you talked about on Nick's pod, Haynes, of Occupy Wall Street,
Yes.
and
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
whole era of kind of like bubbling cross political populist energy on the
Right.
left and on the right, and
A lot of
it's a bit of a
overlapping. Yeah.
conspiracy theory, but there's the sense that the kind of neoliberal elites swooped in and they're like, we gotta put a stop to this.
Oh
And
yeah.
so, the Banksies became the janissaries of this neoliberal
Yep.
order.
And you know
And
what?
yeah,
To kind of build on what Matt mentioned earlier, like you look at pre-internet. Well, before the internet was like, I suppose, mainstream and buried in the foundation. Like Shepard Fairey spammed America and like parts of the world with just like Andre the Giant's big old mug and the words "Obey." Or sometimes Andre the Giant has a posse, like 7'4", 500 and something pounds. Like, and it was it transcended being ominous because then it was almost entirely up to the response of the viewer, the person who was standing there at that lamppost, at that train station, in front of that wall. You know what I mean? And
absolutely.
it as if it was seemingly propagating itself, like outside the public scope and eye. And then, decade and a half, maybe a little more later, he's the reason Obama has the Hope poster. Like
Yeah,
that's and so like I'm just picturing like what Matt described, like this like thing that extracts like artistic like strength and merit and aim and psychic residue and focus, and they're just wringing it into a bucket, and then they pour the bucket into a mold, and it's like and uh approved centrist message
Yeah.
brought to you by Lobo Homo and keeping gay oligarchy alive.
Yeah, I mean, you can even look at Obama himself that way, like a little bit. In 2008, there was a lot of sort of leftist hope for. Not, I'm
no,
not a
that's true.
leftist,
Yeah,
so I'm not saying I wish that he was more of a leftist because, again, I'm not. But at the same time, yeah, he too was like Obama's like this fresh, new person who's going to bring change and hope, and you know, totally did what you just described happening, poured into the mold of supporting gay oligarchy, however you eloquently put it. Yeah.
And what makes it sad is that I remember like there was a video where it was a montage of like people fainting when Obama spoke because he really like people were under the impression that he was going to be president, and then 8 years of Bush would be undone on day one, and there would be like people cartwheeling down the street, and it was hands across America. And no, like first of all, more people got deported under him than like anyone in so long. Courtesy of drone warfare, there's a stretch of Middle East that is the most stressed out corner of the earth. Because like, hey, what's that? Oh God, it's a drone. Oh, he and then no one ever talks about how on his very last day in office he pardoned dozens of people who were serving felony sentences for trafficking cocaine. This guy, like, I he was the this like you know what, Matt? I'm glad you bring this up because, like, first of all, one of the worst things about the last 15 years in this country is having a good memory. Like living in America, if you have a good memory, you'll be haunted by shit. And I remember when like Obama was elected president, and then he went on a Middle East apology tour.
oh
You
yeah,
remember that? All right,
for
and
sure.
then that was the beginning of my journey of slowly turning into my dad. Because I remember the first thing I thought of was like, "No, you fool! That's just gonna make us weak." And like, don't you understand? And then like, 1 week later, like I'm hanging out with Papa Haynes, and he's just like looking at the newspaper, and he's like, he makes us look like wimps. Look at him, and I'm like, it's happening. Like, no,
Yeah,
he was such ay ay ay. But you do bring up an excellent point because he was touted as this young, refreshing breath of mountain air, and he's gonna get things done. And it's like, you don't believe in God? That's cool because he's cool and you're cool, and if you vote for him, you're cool too. Yeah. And it was this amazing, slick, fucking downhill, like fucking train on fire with greased wheels that just like pummeled the American public into like rallying around this thing. And Dan, I don't know if you saw this in your neck of the woods, but like elderly people, especially immigrant elderly people, were like, Obama's the Antichrist. There was
oh
like a
yeah,
small
yeah.
contingency of like elderly Greek people who were convinced he was the Antichrist.
Well, I have some older white friends of my parents who were also convinced of that. Not immigrants, but yeah, no, I mean literally. I remember some guy was telling me you could tell by the color of his lips that, and I'm like, well, I'm pretty based, but I don't know about that, man. I'm gonna peace out on that one.
But one thing I want to harass you real quickly about, Matt, is that like so you spent time in New York City, so obviously you see how compared to other cities, like in New York, everyone's living on top of each other. The city
Mhm.
is kind of like a gigantic building that's falling in slow motion, and when it hits the floor on impact, it starts to rebuild itself, and it's just like lurching towards the horizon, right?
Yeah,
So
totally.
LA, on the other hand, is like, hey, we're going to be stuck on the 101 for an hour and a half if there's
Right,
rolling papers in
right.
the glove compartment. You know, it's easy to take for granted that like your city is a cultural touchstone and of course has like history, lurid history and context and lore, but history and context nonetheless. I'm curious, like, were you born and raised in LA?
Definitely
Did
not. Yeah, go on.
oh,
Yeah.
so okay, I'm curious because like you got like and I mean this sincerely without a hint of irony. I mean like you got a big old Al Bundy nose, so that means you're not a wasp. That means you don't have that little teeny tiny button upturned nose where like you've seen like butlers fight to the death in a sawdust pit. Like
Mhm.
you got like white you got like white middle America honky nose like Al Bundy. So like where are you from? Like the Midwest?
No, but yes and no. I'm from Syracuse, New York. So I'm
Mm.
from the gates of the Midwest, I would say. Contrary to, and a lot of people look at you weird when you say that because they don't think of New York State as containing that. But like, as anyone who's kind of been up, and Dan and I have talked about this. Dan has well, you've been
Upstate
spent
New
some time
York.
in Watertown, or I don't. You said
Yeah, yeah,
Watertown.
Watertown.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
I have
fine. There you go.
relatives
Which
in
is the
Watertown.
same general. I think it's the same area code as Syracuse, too, despite being a couple hours away. But anyway, yeah, I'm from Syracuse. And originally from Syracuse, the first like 12 years of my life.
Mm.
But no family in California. I moved out here on my own. Um,
Matt had a dream. He had
yeah,
a California dream.
yeah, and I've kind of settled down out here.
Is
But
there
yeah.
so obviously like the like LA is more of a sprawl than
Hmm.
like a condensed graph paper grid like Manhattan.
Oh
However,
yeah.
there's more to LA than just fucking like Sunset Boulevard in the way that like, Dan, you could attest to this where like when some people think of New York City, they just think of like the Manhattan skyline and Carrie's apartment from Sex in the City, even though there's also like Brooklyn, Queens, the
Hmm.
Bronx, and Staten Island, and kind of
Absolutely.
sorta Yonkers and Nassau County and parts of Long Island. So like Matt, uh, LA is sort of like several fucking municipalities and
Hmm.
domains all tied together at
Yeah,
once
completely. Yeah.
in this weird somewhere between the present and a post-apocalyptic dystopian future where people made the best of it.
Hmm.
Because like first of all, like if you don't drive, you will end up in the Skid Row Thunderdome, right?
Yeah, you need to drive out here. There's no doubt about that. I mean, yeah, like it's just not a traversable city without drive. Now that being said, we do have public transportation that's a little bit better than people say, but for the most part, no one really uses it.
Mm.
People who haven't spent a lot of time in LA or New York, I don't know how much this makes sense, but you just kind of have to be here to realize just how necessary it is to drive here and how unnecessary it is to drive in New York. I mean, it's a
Absolutely.
substantial difference just in the way things are laid out.
Oh
Well,
yeah.
it's also just a status thing, right? Like if you take the bus in LA, it's kind of like going to a restaurant and whipping out a Discover card, and it's like, oh yeah, you're poor, you're fucked. So
Yeah,
like
and
you
I've
you
never
need
done
a
it
car.
myself. Yeah, you need a car. But I have the impression, I don't know if this is true, but I have the impression it would take a lot longer to get anywhere via public transpo than it does New York. Is just very streamlined, and you can
Oh
hop it.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
going to
No,
be
I
there's going to be a
in
station at the end of your block.
2014, I
Yeah.
went to LA to visit a friend there. I didn't rent a car. I was staying in Santa Monica. My friend was, I think, in somewhere in Hollywood. And so just like I was on the bus, like visiting him, it took forever,
Yeah, no,
forever to
it's
get there. It
Man.
was just a disaster.
yeah. So that's perhaps the biggest difference. And I don't know. You kind of just have to visit both cities to feel just how fundamentally different they are. I mean, there's some similar sort of industry stuff in both places, and a certain, by cliche, or not by cliche, by like one imagines the same kind of coastal elite in both cities, but man, it's a different vibe. And I feel like if you're in LA long enough, it changes you. If you're in New York long enough, it changes you. I think I'm going on 5 years here in LA, and I think I've
Ah.
become Californiaized, not politically per se, but in terms of many other small details of my life and my penchants and preferences. I think it's had an effect, and I don't think it's a negative effect. I think and you see some people on quote unquote our side talking about this, like BAP even, where it's like, yeah, you can shit on California politically all day, but like there is a good quality of life out here.
Yeah, the fucking municipal golf course out there are fucking top notch and like bar none. They're no, like parts of in my opinion, like Southern California is kind of like grain alcohol or wasabi. It's great in small doses. And we take for granted that like when people compare New York and LA, I think a stark fundamental difference people lose sight of is that like in LA, other than like a stretch of unbearable heat during the summer, it's really nice almost all day, and it rains what 5 minutes at a time, like
Yeah.
out there. Right. However, like in New York, it's all concrete and there's nothing to retain the heat or the cold. So you end up like, and I'm not saying this to blow anyone's spot. Like I'm half Greek. Greeks are not a dry people. But at the fucking expat reading, I show up there and it's like, God, it's fucking hot outside. And then we go inside.
Yeah.
And like even though there's air conditioning in the dude's place, and it was like, God, it's fucking hot in here. And there's a guy with like a sweat stains in the back of his shirt, and I'm like, all right, like he has it worse than I do. I suddenly don't feel bad looking like I'm sweating fucking feta cheese over here. But
No, yeah, no, it's a real thing. The humidity, dude, that's what gets you. I was on the East Coast a few weeks ago, and I'm so used to the dry heat out here in California that I haven't been uncomfortably hot like a single time yet this summer here in LA. And then but when I was back on the East Coast, it was probably about 10 degrees cooler, but the humidity just made me, not to be like weird or TMI, but like it made me like just sweat in areas that I only sweat when I'm on the East Coast. I don't know. And like it just, I hold this uncomfortable feeling that I remember from growing up. But yeah, to me, LA is more comfortable, even with regard to the heat in the summer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to the. I mean, the Eastern Seaboard is the only place outside of the swamp where people get swamp ass.
Yeah.
Believe you me.
Oh my God.
That is the
grew up with
technical
swamp
term.
ass.
Swamp
Yeah.
ass.
But no. One thing that I've always found fascinating though is how like all right, like in LA, kind of like in New York, all right, like the hot girl of every town and small city goes to either or. Although I wonder how much spillover there is that ends up in Chicago. But anyways, or like
Austin, Texas, and all these other random places
Austin
now.
these days. Yeah.
Right. So at the same time though, like geographically speaking, like New York State is a vast state, and the city is only like 1/30th of the state.
Mhm.
But then you look at California, it's like three fucking states put together.
Yeah.
All right. It is this gigantic like nation within a nation with its own like laws and customs and cultures
California
and
Republic.
history.
Yeah.
We often take for granted that like there's a lot of desert out there too.
Oh yeah.
Like you leave a major city in California and you start seeing people wearing like trucker hats unironically in like a 10-minute drive, you know?
Yeah.
It's like have you I know this. It's like hey, you left fucking Syracuse and now you're in Los Angeles. You miss anything from Syracuse? Like, but is there anything from New York you miss? Is there anything from the East Coast you miss?
Oh yeah. So initially, and this is gonna sound ironic, initially the thing that I missed the most might have been the rain. I feel like that has subsided. I'm no longer as emotionally attached to rain, but growing up with rainstorms every few days in the summer, You get used to it and you kind of miss it. I don't think about that so much anymore, but I really missed that my first year. Generally speaking, I miss the same thing that I was just describing as like good, or like that I miss and don't miss, the changing
Yeah.
of the weather. I don't miss that humidity I was talking about at all, but I do miss having more defined seasons. So there's and the way, and not just for the sake of the weather, not just for the sake of novelty of the weather, but I think it affects in a weird way your sense of the passage of time. And initially, it kind of freaked me out in LA. Like it's like the same day over and over and over. It's like Groundhog's Day, or fucking,
Yeah.
or like the Truman Show, even just like a lot of people have this experience in LA, and they tie it in their mind a little bit like the Hollywood culture, which may play a part of it too. But I really do think it has to do with the weather, where it's like, oh, it kind of everything feels a little fake here. You know what I mean? I don't mean that in some kind of snobbish East Coast way, like, oh, the people are fake, but not really. I don't really buy into that. It's just something about the weather and something about the culture feels a little more like New York is like, this is a cliche, but I think it's true. New York is like gritty and real, and you're kind of cheek to jowl with the whole population when you're on public transit. So LA is a lot more kind of soft and cocooned. In some ways, that's a good thing. Like it's a good place. You can really focus on your own shit or something. Like I don't know. It's the things that about LA that are different. There's a positive and a negative side of them. Sometimes I miss aspects of the East Coast, but I've kind of gotten more used to that. Is kind of what I was trying to say about being Californized. Like I'm now kind of used to just having nice weather every day and just like living in a little bit more of a bubble, so to speak. But that's the big thing.
I mean, it's I'm curious because like I'm born and raised here, and like first of all, like just because you get used to something doesn't mean it's healthy. All right, look at like fucking crackheads and vegetarians. All right, like whenever I leave the city. Whenever if I'm lucky and I get to leave the country, the first 2 or 3 days, it's a nightmare because unless I have traffic in the window outside closest to where my head is where I'm sleeping, I have trouble falling asleep unless there's noise. All right.
Yeah.
Second of all, there's this weird inherent desire to just fucking show up, go and be like, what do you mean you ain't got no fucking calzones here? Like then you take for granted. And I think the reason New York pizza is as good as it is,
the Italian food's a lot better.
In the water.
Yeah,
there's something in the water that is conducive to tomato sauce based anything. So, like,
I was
of
actually
course, the guinea.
Go on, but I was going to say something about that next, but continue.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons why the Guinea Dago Wops here have a monopoly over cuisine with the ever so delicious, like some of the best tap water in America. Like, if memory serves me correctly, there are eateries that have New York tap water delivered to them by truck because they have to make the dough that way, to make the pasta that way, to make the sauce that way.
Absolutely. What I was going to say that I missed from Syracuse specifically, so I was just back in Syracuse, not to tell listeners all of my comings and goings. So I was just briefly back in Syracuse 3 weeks ago for the first time in 5 years, and there's this tiny bakery in the town, like the sub little hamlet that I was born in, Italian bakery. And oh my God, is it good? And you can't find anything like it in LA. You probably can in New York, but basically anything Italian, anything. And whether it's the tap water, because I don't know, Syracuse is different than New York City in terms of tap water, but just the recipes or whatever was handed out. Also, I got like 6 donuts and a fucking, not that I encourage listeners to eat that way, but when you're back in your hometown, I got like a bunch of donuts and like a piece of pizza for like $4. Like it's also like cheap as hell.
Sweet. So what is the issue with burritos here though? Because in New York they're famously not as good as in LA. So I think like
in
we
LA,
have like a system where
Dan and I have had people pull knives, throw chairs at us, fucking threaten to slash our tires. One dude, all right, so like Dan was talking about burritos. And then a guy was like, "Are you from here?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'm from here." And he was like, "Yeah, well, if I ever see you in LA, you better have someone else start your car." This whole burrito taco nonsense, West Coast, East Coast shit. What's going on out there, Matt? Like,
wait, what do you mean? Because I was gonna say that I think, and my friend pointed this out. I think he was right. The Mexican food is better in LA, I think.
And but my question is why, right? Because we got a lot of Mexicans here in New York.
Well, we have a decent number of Italians in LA. We have a decent number, and it's not good. I think it's something with proximity or the type of population. I think I don't exactly
I
know,
think it's
but
kind of funny how in New York City, if I were like, look at those bunch of Mexicans over there, people would freak out. But in LA, every hour on the hour, someone's like, look at those bunch of Mexicans over there. I find it fascinating how the Latino breakup. I'm sure there's like two Puerto Ricans and a Cuban guy somewhere in LA. But
yeah,
like, because proximity to Mexico, when it's Latino is synonymous with not just
pretty
Mexican,
much.
but like Chicano, because we could
Chicano.
agree that like the Mexicans in New York City look different than the Mexicans in LA,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Right.
Mm.
So I've always wondered if it's like because they have like an established dominant foothold in culture and demographics
I
in LA
think
for so
so.
long.
Yeah, I
Ah,
think
okay.
I don't exactly know what that would translate to in terms of is it recipes or what. I think it's the same with Italians. There's a
Right,
decent number of
right.
Italians in LA, but it's not the same kind of ethnos. I don't know.
Mm,
Not to get too
That's an interesting
yeah,
idea
it
that
does.
the
yeah.
Italian community in New York has cemented itself into a sort of institution, and that
Yes.
in Mexico, not Mexico, in California,
Might as well.
in California, Mexicans have done the same thing,
Let's
and
put it
they've
this
yet to
way.
do
Yeah.
that in New York.
I don't think right after Ellis Island is one thing, but I think nowadays if you're an Italian in New York, you don't feel like an outsider, and I think that's been the case for decades.
Yeah.
And I think if you're a Mexican in LA, I don't think you feel like an outsider. But conversely, well, not that you feel like an outsider as an Italian in LA, but I think if you're an Italian in LA, you kind of feel like another white person. And I think if you're a Mexican in NYC, you probably feel like one of many minorities. But in LA, it's different. It's like, I'm
Mm,
not Mexican, so I can't speak to it, but I think that, I mean, it's a really significant, definitely significant Latino population, but specifically Mexican. It's a different ethnos, different
right,
state of mind, and I
right.
do think it makes I don't know how it ends up affecting food, but it seems to. So there you go.
I
Uh,
think we're breaking new sociological ground here. This is like we
Yeah.
need to start a course on races.
no, but
Racial studies series. Yeah.
I'm really glad, Matt, that you brought up the little Italian bakery because a weird running theme, and like Dan, you could attest to this, a weird running theme in parts of like New York City and like by extension New York is how like there's always like a pizzeria or
Yeah.
an Italian bakery, and by virtue of being growing up near it that ends up becoming your measurement, your benchmark for all other like Italian cookies, for all other Sicilian corner slices, for all of you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
like for example, there's a Sicilian bakery here in Astoria called Laguli's. All right, and it is uh not to flex or brag on anybody, but like I've ruined people's Italian bakery experience by bringing butter cookies from this bakery to like a party, and they're like, "Hey, what was that bakery you got those butter cookies from?" Or like that like red velvet cheesecake, or like those cannolis. And I was like, "Oh, Laguli's," and they're like, "Yeah, everything I've had from a bakery ever since kind of sucks compared to that." So like next time I hold something, pull through with some of those, okay? And I'm like, all right, ho, I scared with a copy of Cars and Women magazine, back at you. Um, but but Matt, this Italian bakery, did it have like the black and white cookies? Did it
Absolutely,
have?
that's one of the things I got. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
yes. Oh, that's
The
excellent.
headlight donut. Maybe that's more specific. The other thing I wanted to say about it, and this ties in a little bit what you were saying about like the everyone has their small pizzeria and bakery, and it's like this
Hmm.
yardstick. These places don't change. Like this bakery that I went to in Syracuse tasted and had the exact same selection of stuff that it did when I was like 3 years old in the 90s. Tasted exactly the same, which is somewhat striking to me. Like it's I don't know, it's the recipe. It never changes. It's an
Yeah.
amazingly
It's
consistent
Lindy.
thing. And I'm sure it's gone through changes of ownership. Well, not necessarily, and I'm sure it's been passed down. I can't imagine whoever the older Italians that were running it in the 90s, are still running it now. But yeah, they stay true. These aren't places that are like trying new shit.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, not to turn this into the once upon a time I did this power hour, but when I got out of high school, after working and stocking shelves at a supermarket that doesn't exist anymore, at least in my neck of the woods, Western Beef, I started working at a
Mm.
pizzeria. And I worked at a pizzeria that also did catering, and I worked there for 4.5 years. And one of the secrets to the sauce is that like the boss never just washed out the pan. like the big gigantic pot that he made all the tomato sauce in. Even when it ran out, he would just like, all right, we got to make a new batch of sauce, and every batch had remnants of the previous batch. So
Mm.
Oh
there was
wow.
this like eternal sauce that always had to be stirred. And even on my first day, he like the only three rules were this. He was like, one, if you're gonna be late, you have to let me know beforehand. I don't care if you're 11 hours late. Let me know you're gonna be late. Number two, if I ever see the sauce stick, I'll kill you. And if I ever walk by the sink and it's not empty, I'll kill you even faster. And everyone laughed, and in my head, I'm like, that's not funny. And yeah, but I learned a lot about myself and about how to cook. So no, like, and it's a weird thing because you bring this up to some people and they're like, ew, that's weird. Even though, like, it's not that's part of the reason, that pizzeria had sauce, not just tomato sauce, but even pizza sauce that tasted different from like
Oh yeah.
every other, like, you know what I mean? Every 1,463 other pizzerias, you know, in New York City, and out of those
Absolutely.
1,400, like what have you, like 67 of them do catering. We're still the best.
Yeah.
Anyways, like, right.
Absolutely. Not to bring us off track here, but this is a question that I wanted to put to you, Haynes. What is the most based borough in New York City? And
Oh,
there's definitely, this is going to provoke discussion and debate, I suspect.
all right. Well, I am tempted to immediately say Queens only because just on a cultural landscape, um, my soil has given us Christopher Walken, the Ramones, Run DMC, Anthrax. Anthrax is really important because half of
Yeah.
Anthrax went on to make Stormtroopers of Death. Um, if you count
Awesome.
if you count fictional, John Favreau, Lucy Liu, which
Hmm.
Lucy Liu's kind of underwhelming in this category. No offense, Mrs. Liu, if you've ever listened to this, and if you do, buy a shirt, leave something in the notes so I know it's you, and I'll curb stomp what can fit from dirty ass Queens to your mansion in L.A. She's from Queens, all right.
Hmm.
You, I want to say Martin Scorsese's from Queens, but I could be wrong.
What
Don't
about
quote me on that.
Trump is from Queens,
Trump
right?
is from
Yep.
Queens. He's
Yeah.
a
Yes.
native son.
From Jamaica State. He is. So is 50 Cent and Nas.
Right. Right.
Uh,
Nicki
and
Minaj.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, and if you want to count works of fiction, Archie Bunker and Spider Man. That's a tough act to
Yeah.
follow,
Yeah.
huh? So I'm tempted to immediately go, oh, and the New York Mets. Quick little fun fact. You know how you could watch Goodfellas, and even if you have zero interest in organized crime, you could appreciate it on a technical level because it's such a
Yeah,
well
yeah.
put together film. There's a book
Mhm.
called "And the Bad Guys Won," and it's about the 1986 Mets who win the World Series. And it's like you could give two fucks less about baseball or just about the Mets or New York City, and it is one of the most compelling books I've ever read in years.
Yeah,
I'll have
my
to
my
check it
cousin
out.
told me about this book. Because it's the '80s Mets were notoriously coked out, right?
Yeah, yeah. There's one passage where it was like part of the season for Keith Hernandez was like he got busted for coke. So then in the morning he would have to do like a speech at school to tell kids not to do coke, and then before the game he was doing coke and then smoking cigarettes and doing the crossword puzzle on the newspaper of whatever town he was on, like on the road to go up against, and then they'd win a game, and then he'd hang out with the Mets, and then he'd do more coke, and then like he'd stagger into work the next day and be like, PS 184. All right, yeah, yeah, yeah. Hey kids, don't do coke. And you've just got a light. And you've just got a light. Come on, don't be shy. My fucking head hurts. That was and he was the captain of these scumbags, these the biggest crumb bums on earth ever put together with like uniforms and bats. They were like the unofficial gang from the Warriors that were a few years late. It was such a good book. You should really check it out, dude.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
no.
I should.
Uh,
I
I
I think it gets into like if we're going to talk about what the most based borough is, what do we mean by based? And I think
mm,
based in some sense means not putting on affectations, rooted to the ground, rooted to like your true human nature, shall we say? And so it's
oh,
not just about like are you right wing? Though you are, but like it's about like are you authentic in some sense? I think based has that connotation. And so, like, if we're gonna say like what's the most right wing borough, obviously it's Staten Island.
Right.
So like,
I will say, if this makes sense, the most the Bronx is quite red pilled, but that's because like they just can't afford identity politics and that shit doesn't fly.
Yeah.
You don't see like okay, Matt, I don't know if it's like this in LA, but here in New York City, you know you're in a nice neighborhood when you start seeing BLM like signs on the windows and on the
Oh yeah,
lawns.
it's a
You
little bit like that here too.
yeah, like you know,
yeah,
like in this house we believe in science, and it's like yeah, it must be a good school district too. I wouldn't
Yeah.
be surprised. So you don't see a lot of that in the Bronx.
no.
It's funny to see that in like across the street from like Thompson Square Park or Washington Square Park, you'll see those flags on fire escapes, and these are like jerk offs paying like what 3,000, 4,000 like a month to live there. Come on, but they could afford it. And hey, speaking of based Staten Island, I don't know if it's like this in your neck of the woods, Matt, but like I've always imagined Staten Island was like a section of the city. Every city has a section where if you go there, the locals are like, "What the fuck are you doing here?" Because
Yeah.
Staten Island is a little out of the way. It does has its own lore
Mhm.
and connection to the city, but like it is like first of all, you got to take a fucking ferry to get there. All right, and second of all, it is this really weird like I don't know if there's something in the water, but like it breeds a particular unique like it's not the sticks. It's like this weird like third distant cousin who looks a little off. That's
Yeah,
Staten
So,
Island.
The
so
San-
Staten Island,
yeah.
the way I conceive of it is kind of like they took the Brooklyn Italians and they kind of let them isolated them, and it's like enhanced the Italianness of them. So it's just like very powerful Guido energy
Yeah.
on Staten Island.
It's the
And
only borough of New York I've never been to
it's like
because I
like
never taken
and
the
just
ferry. Yeah.
totally like if you were to like take them to Italy and like I my high school had a lot of Brooklyn Italians. I grew up in Bay Ridge, and yeah, like if you were to take the Staten Island Italian to Italy, because we had in my high school transfer students from Italy. It's just like two different species.
Yeah.
Oh,
They're just
oh
not the
yeah.
same at all.
Oh no, 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 no. I mean, it is funny because like even among Greeks, it's funny how like the Greeks who have settled in, and even like imagine a Greek who like settled in and he has like a family and kids, but he still has an accent. And then he walks by someone like and he hears like a fresh off the boat accent, and he's like, "Look at this fucking immigrant over here. I wonder where he's from." Like, no, it's they're two different like breeds of animal, and I don't mean that in a pejorative way, but like, isn't there a fucking Sopranos episode arc where
Oh
like
yeah, 100%.
Tony and the fellas go to Italy and they're so
Oh, it's so
disconnected
funny.
and
Yeah.
out of touch they are with quote unquote the motherland. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I imagine it's
especially
like that.
Tony Serpico, rest in peace. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah, no, very one of the funniest, perhaps, Sopranos arcs. Yeah.
Yeah, I imagine it's like that to varying degree with like a lot of. I mean, because I know it's like that for Greeks, and of course, like no matter how good my Spanish is, I always because first of all, I look like I sell souvlaki in Astoria Park, all right? Like so whenever I speak Spanish, my whole life it's always like, oh, mira qué lindo, ¿a dónde aprende español? Like, wow, how nice. Like, where did you learn Spanish? And it's always like, uh, my mom. I don't know because I don't look like them, which is weird because like first of all, like there's no Latino identity. That is a meme invented by academia and media conglomerates in Miami. Because in Latin America, there are lines very hardly drawn like in the sand with like color and race. You know, Latino identity is kind of like a weird meme because it undermines the fact that like dude, like fucking watch Telemundo. You'll see, which is not indicative of the population, but you'll see some motherfucker who looks like the brawny paper towel guy, and he's like, "Buenas noches, estamos hablando con Matt y Dan, en eso programa de radio aquí en el internet." And I look like the brawny paper towel guy, you know. And of course, the weather woman is always like a 17 out of 10. and you could sometimes find that in Jackson Heights. Not gonna lie, but like it's not indicative of the rest of the population. So like even a friend of mine, all right, she's from El Salvador, and even though she grew up speaking Spanish and is like knows the culture like the back of her hand, when she visits family back in El Salvador, like she'll never truly fit in, even if she moves back. You know what I mean? Like to varying degrees. I'd like to think every come on, like imagine every fucking masshole going to the mother country of Ireland and they're getting heckled by real Irish people. Like, you got a bunch of jerk offs who sound like they're extras from The Departed. Like,
well,
get
like
the
the
fuck out
interesting
about
thing
Ireland.
that happens is like when you are an ethnicity, and I mean, you see this with the Massels, you see this with the Guidos. They kind of like they hype it up. They hype up their ethnic identity. They
Yeah.
kind of they jack up the testosterone and yeah, but you take like a Brooklyn Guido to Italy, and they're just like, who is this clown? Or you take a masshole to Ireland, and they're just like it's like this kind of I mean I like Brooklyn Italians. I don't know if I like massholes, but
I love the notion of like some Guinea in a tracksuit just walking down this like beaten up old country road in like a small Italian town, like 3 hours west of Naples in the countryside, like a town of 300. He's just walking down a road, and then there's like a farmer and his daughter, and he passes by someone. He's like, "Bro, she's fucking hot. Can you put in a good word for me, bro? She make good sauce. Hey, yo!" And he's like trying to wave her down. No, just two complete different creatures, man.
Yo, bro, where's the gym?
Bro, I'm deflating over here. Push-ups ain't. Come on, man. You know what it's like. Look at you. Look at these arms. Guy doesn't speak a word of English. He's just like smiling and nodding. Grazie.
So what has it been like in Astoria? You grew up there, and like Astoria, unlike maybe Woodside, unlike Elmhurst or Jackson Heights to a certain extent, Astoria has gentrified. So what's that been like?
Oh, well, it's been a little surreal. At first, it was demoralizing because of the immediate shift that I think is not only happening in my city, but it always struck me as odd how gentrification hit multiple cities at the same time, and then when a decade passed, suddenly there's like a housing exodus because of like price. Because it's not like Matt, I imagine Los Angeles is not a cheap place to live in, and neither is like New York City.
No, yeah.
And it's like yet that is tied to discussions about class no one ever really like wants to have, which I would argue is the one true privilege. Like wealth can buy you privilege.
Mm-hmm.
So seeing it was weird to see like things that I saw growing up that predated me are like, that's a Starbucks now, and like that was tough to watch. It's like all right, once there was like a Starbucks in Manhattan, that was like a weird indicator of like like, hey, like the green zone is built, come do business here, things are for sale. So to see that in Astoria thus led to this change that was happening and unfolding much faster in a place like Williamsburg than in a place like Astoria. Now, granted, there are like stretches of Brooklyn and Queens that are like really out the way, where like the further you are from public transportation, the less likely you'll get gentrified. Because you go to like Cypress Hills in Brooklyn, I think it's relatively untouched, right?
Oh yeah, no,
but it's like out of the way,
Yeah.
So like take Glendale, which is right next door to Ridgewood, which is funny because Ridgewood got gentrified, even though growing up Ridgewood was, the wrong side of the tracks. If you grew up in Glendale, So Ridgewood got gentrified, and Glendale, instead of being predominantly German, is now like Italians, Slavs, I think, Polish, but no. So anyways, just real quickly before I forget, to grow up and see my neighborhood change, that was sort of the impetus for putting up like daddy's money stickers. That's where it all starts. Like all the flyers, all the shirts,
Hmm.
Daddy's Money was the first logo and design that was like,
Yeah, yeah.
all right, this is all of the culminated like dejection and not just like the changes in my neighborhood. Because no matter how, first of all, like imagine talking about gentrification, but you don't know the word yet. And you just sound like some crazy person talking about your neighborhood mutating in real life.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
then you
yeah.
try to talk to other people about it. And it's like when you're a kid and you don't know the word hypocrite, but you already know what it means, you know?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Yeah,
right. So,
yeah,
so
yeah.
so then you finally have a word for it. Otherwise, you're no different than a guy in an abandoned gas station walking in a circle eight, going like, yeah, but economic development minus community development equals the thing that's happening in my neighborhood. And oh, the bus is here. I got to go to work. Like
I
there's no meaningful way to talk about it. And the Daddy's Money logos and designs were like I had an axe to fucking grind. I still do, and like that's where it all starts.
I
So
like this idea of your art being a kind of outgrowth of populist anger at gentrification, and kind of like that's one thing that I was at the beginning trying to put my finger on about 718 TV. It has, it's right coded, but that's only because anything that is populist these days is right coded. And your
Hmm.
shirts, your art, it has this populist message. And
oh
correct me,
yeah,
tell me if I'm speaking out of my ass
no,
here.
no. I mean, it was never explicitly meant to be populist, but I suppose like form follows function, right? So
Yeah,
like take the zine for example. I mean, it's populist insofar as that like the fact that hell, not to sound callous, but like every issue is available online, but that doesn't stop people going, shut up and take my money and subscribing.
yeah,
And
yeah.
at the same time, like in spite of this digital landscape and day and age we find ourselves in, there's a premium on the physical, which is one
Absolutely.
reason why like magazines have been going through this. Um, I kind of want to say like zine culture has had this really weird, like unexpected renaissance.
It
Because I don't want to
has.
call it like a rebirth, but like and with varying degrees of quality. Because like you look at Man's World, and that looks like something you see on like a coffee table or something you expect in like the lobby of like
It's
a doctor's
literally on my
office,
coffee table.
Yeah.
right? And then you got something like Cars and Women magazine that you see tucked into every box of every free newspaper, like from 57th Street to the Brooklyn Bridge.
Cars and women also on my coffee table. I will tell you that.
uh,
But
but I mean, but to
yeah,
answer
no,
your
this.
question,
Oh, go on. Yeah,
I think again, man, like the only real explicit political thing I've ever it's a hill I'm gonna die on is like talking about class because it is the one true privilege. Because for all the talk of, and I could circle this back to like you brought up Occupy Wall Street. If I could just touch on that real
yeah,
quickly,
yeah,
it was
definitely.
kind of sad to see how you had all these like concurrent interests and groups, which like first of all people like collectivized like now we're past stage one thinking. But now that we're here, there were some people just content to do the drum circles and look bad on the news and give them footage that will later be edited to make them look even dumber. All right.
Yeah,
But it was wild because on day one, they had to hire an accountant for all the donations pouring in. I have some books I took from the People's Library out of spite because after the first couple of weeks, and I only saw this shit because the U.S. media has two modes: blackout and circus. Okay, so
yeah,
like
yeah,
I'm watching like I think it was RT, and not that I'm a proponent of RT, but I had like cable back then. So I'm just
yeah.
like, oh, okay, Simpsons reruns is on fucking commercial break. Up. And then it's like Occupy Wall Street footage, and a guy had a sign in the background that said, "Why are you watching this at home?" And I'm like, "That's a damn good question." So I went later that weekend, and I was quite taken aback because the impression that was left on me is, wow, common goals outweigh common interests. Look at all these different populations and all these different groups with various multifaceted end goals of what they want, but they're all eye to eye on the table of like there's a 99%, there's a 1%. There's like something wrong with this picture. That's basically their final one issue voter grievance. was. So then the meetings turned into this cacophony of animal sounds when the progressive stack was introduced, and then there was the order with which people could speak in. And even if you were willing to overlook that, which, like, on the surface, it's like, okay, one can argue that these marginalized groups that have not had a voice in an and buzzword, catchphrase, verb to adjective, noun. Okay, on a surface level, let them talk first. Okay, I'm willing to acquiesce that. But then it's like I'm getting yelled at because, like, I'm not allowed to be here because I eat meat and crack too many jokes. That woman over there can't be a feminist because she's wearing makeup and garters, even though she fucking bought the how to make a 501 like paperwork PowerPoint presentation, and you're just gonna kick her out because, like, she doesn't fit your version of this shit. And then it just breaks down into like people like snakes eating their own tail. And it
Yeah.
just turned into, and you know what? The only time people ever set aside their grievances was to be like, fuck white people, which is weird because there were a lot of like Bernie Sanders type
Oh
dudes and
yeah,
then
yeah.
working class guys and like even a couple of like Bay Ridge dock worker looking type guys who was like, no, he's Italian, he's not white, which is funny because like Italians were considered minorities in the census up until like the late 60s, okay? And like
Yeah.
they felt threatened because like one of them just said like what did my grandparents ever do to your grandparents? Like, why are you pulling me into this? And just like, no, there was never any answer to any of these grievances. It always seemed to come from this really weird view of the world that was thousands of volumes wide but only one volume deep. All right. And for example, like, I'm a Muslim feminist, and I'm like, all right, in Islam, there's only one gender, and women are property. So like, how do you acquiesce that? Like some woman 3 years ago on like Steinway Street died out because like there's female genital mutilation, so they snip the clit, but they wanted to keep it. They didn't want to freak out the authorities, so she didn't go to the hospital, and they thought she'd be okay, and like she died. So like, what's up with
Jesus.
that? If you're a Muslim feminist, what's up with that? And then I was asked to leave. So yeah, that was my experience with Occupy Wall Street, man. Good times.
Yeah. I
Good
mean,
times.
crucially, right? It's like you're being asked to leave because of your opinions. It's not because you're a white guy exactly, because like, you could claim Hispanic or Latino
Well,
heritage if you wanted to.
I'm kind of swarthy. Like, I'm like, I've been called white adjacent.
Mhm.
I've been called not quite white. I've been called you look white, but you don't act white. Which is one of the highest praises like a black person could give you. You know, like like two steps down from like the N word passes that. I think one step above that is you're invited to the cookout, and then you're allowd to say it. So, but but
Well, you're
but
gonna get
no,
there sooner than I will, so let me know.
no. Everyone loves a comeback story, though, dude. Everyone loves an underdog. So like, there should be like a montage of you like at church volunteering. Now you're like singing along with the choir. You're like volunteering at the Boys and Girls Club. You're at a cookout. You just drop the N word. Everyone gives you a standing ovation. Come on, dude. You could make it happen. You could totally make it happen, Dan.
Yeah, it's something to shoot for. I
Uh,
gotta. It's my new project.
but one
Getting
thing
my
I've
N-word
learned,
pass.
one one thing I learned though from Occupy Wall Street is that like this tent of intersectional allies could never really see eye to eye because their
Right.
grievances could only be set aside when their ideology was which is weird that like I'm the spawn of immigrants in the public education system, and I'm not even white. So for me to go, wow, these people really hate not just white people, but like working class white people. Like, that was the first time I ever saw people laughing at opioid death and like meth death statistics. Like, in fact, I remember overhearing this one smarmy bitch go like, "Oh, well, I mean, they're just future opioid statistics anyway," which turned out to be a really haunting line over the years. And
Yeah,
for
yeah.
someone to be that aware, for someone to have their ear that close to the ground and like be absorbed into this progressive stack. You know what? You know what happened to Occupy Wall Street, dude? It's this really weird cycle of infiltrate and subvert.
Yeah.
Like,
Top down, and frankly, anti-white, anti, male, whatever narratives that are introduced from the top that break apart what could be progressive coalitions.
Oh no, because it's scary because there are so many abundantly obvious arguments that are not only to be made about this, but like being labeled dissident or even right wing, like and only the other side would possibly ever disagree. But then like you end up with this really weird. I know it sounds cliche to say like it's like they're living in a different reality, but like not to beat a dead horse, but you guys remember like the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, right?
Of
Of
course.
Like,
course.
all right, so we hit this insane benchmark where two groups of people can see the same footage. And like, so let's say like you guys are watching the footage and like, Matt turns to Dan and he's like, wow, that was a good shot. I don't think even I could have done something like that under such stressful conditions. Holy shit, that was traumatic and jarring. And he could have died several times in the span of like 15 seconds. And then Dan's like, yeah. And then I look at it and I'm like, cross state lines, long gun, bad man, Trump, incel, anti-Semite, talking point 404 loading,
Yeah.
And we hit. First of all, I will say that eyewitness accounts can be like not the most sustainable thing. Like I'm sure if Dan and I saw something and the police had to take statements, there'd be like a few differences, sure. But like this was on a national level. Now that same response of two groups of people looking at the same footage and getting worlds apart of a response. Now we're gonna have that with Taiwan. We had it with Ukraine. You could have it with race about who you vote for. In fact, if you know one answer to any of these questions, you could kind of sort of safely assume what they think and believe in, like almost entirely.
Mhm.
Like, am I wrong? Like,
No, you're right.
like,
I
like,
mean,
like,
it's a whole worldview. It's,
yeah,
Yeah.
like,
artificially constructed worldview that, a simultaneously, not to channel Uncle Yarv too much, but decentralized, but, universally adopted and from the top worldview that
oh,
permeates. And
and
so if you disagree with any of these things, you become a kind of outsider. You become what we are, and you kind of, have your own, beliefs that your side propagates to a certain extent.
yeah, it's not to ceaselessly show my zine, but in Cars and Women
No, no,
magazine number
please.
4, there's this thing I wrote called the Ukrainian litmus test, and where like if you talk to someone and if they're pro-Ukraine, there is like there are better than Vegas odds in your favor that they will also believe in the follow. So like I don't think I've ever met someone who was like pro-Ukraine who also didn't believe in like the following, like if you were to cite like FBI crime statistics, that's what they used to call hate facts back in the day. Remember?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and if you and elderly people getting put into comas by melanated individuals on CCTV is white supremacy, which is my favorite. That is my favorite psyop of all time. That is no, because there's no. That is like the Voight Kampf test of like the early 2020s now. Show
Yeah.
someone footage of like an elderly woman getting stomped into a coma, and if they're like, oh, this is the face of white supremacy, you've got a problem on your hands now. Like I hope you bought backup and the door's locked. So but
Yeah,
no,
no, insane
it,
psyop.
it's my favorite psyop of all time. And just real quickly, just so we could round things out, because I know if there's anything you'd like to discuss before we retire for the afternoon, I would like to discuss ending bigly, if you don't mind, Dan.
Oh,
Oh,
absolutely.
100%. Yeah.
And
The the Canada question I wanted to get into. Go on though. Sorry.
yes. Well, ask away, dude, because
Yeah.
I could run my mouth about this endlessly because it's such a bizarre failing upward turn of events and how I ended up contributing to that thing in the first place.
Yeah.
But go
So just
ask
to
away,
outline
dude.
for everyone, Stained. So Terror House put out an anthology. Originally, they had an anthology edited by Bill Marchand called "Ending Bigly: The Many Fates of Donald Trump,"
Hmm.
and so this is a follow up, ending bigly, The Many Fates of Justin Trudeau, also edited by Bill Marchand. And there are a number of illustrious authors in here, but perhaps none more so than Mr. Haynes on the podcast right now. And your article here imagined a civil war in Canada between the Ontarians and the Quebecois, and more or less, and a refugee situation where Canadians are coming to the United States as refugees, and they're being like kind of rejected and treated like with disdain by like the native population in America. And of course, this is a very interesting like dynamic because like obviously these mostly very white people who speak better English than most people in the United States, they would be probably welcomed with open arms. But you in this have like kind of turned it on its head. And so what was the process here? What was the thinking here?
All right. Well, I'll start from the very beginning. All right. So, in like early February, I was posting Canadian trucker convoy memes into the void, like well past its expiration date. The whole thing was over. The old woman on the mobility scooter got trampled by the horse. Show's over, pack it up, go home. And then after that was done, because I had a whole folder of trucker memes, and I was like, I did not get this folder together just to delete it. No, we're gonna post these and just end it, and then one by one, these will go into the recycling bin, and then I delete the folder, and then I move on. I spent a Saturday afternoon doing this. I'll be fucking damned if this goes to waste. So halfway into posting that folder, I get a DM, and it's from Mr. Bill Marchand, the gentleman who edited the book. He's like, "Hey, you want to write for this anthology series?" And of course, he said it much more eloquently than that. And I was like, "Sure. When's the deadline?" And he was like, "Well, like tomorrow." And I'm like, that really doesn't like. That's not like, oh man. And he was like, "You know what? Like, I'll like." Listen, it's not just your work, it's other people's work, but like I'll extend the deadline for you. And I put everything on hold to work on this. One thing I remember doing is because I've been to Canada twice. I visited two shithead internet friends of mine, one of who got married, and he lived in a suburb outside London, Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
And which like was just a like first of all, like as a fucking dirty burger going to Canada, and it's like, you guys got black people here? I think I saw a guy in a turban. Was he a Sikh? Like to realize it isn't just an entire nation of people named Doug who sound funny that went to the diner of the world and then ordered the tuna salad but got the chicken melt and went, and didn't make a fuss over it. I was almost offended by how clean London was, how clean the streets were. I didn't see any blood or gum. That was so weird for me. And not everyone sounded all oot and a boot and talked like that. But some did. And then at a later point, I met up with a shithead internet friend of mine who lives in Montreal. And I think it's safe to say that like the hottest women in North America come from Montreal. Holy shit. It should be illegal. So I remember how jarring it was not speaking French. In fact, like I remember one experience, it was like kind of a weird life-changing experience where like I went to this like my first day in Montreal, I go get coffee, and I go into the cafe, and it's like, the little bell ring on the door, and it's like, bonsoir, comment allez-vous, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, hey, can I get a large coffee? And I had never seen such powerful eye rolling since the last exorcism I've been to.
Oh man.
And then she goes, to stay or to go, sir. And now my initial thought was like, you fucking bitch. Like, what are you talking to me like this for? What do we like? What did I like? If I just cartwheeled into the store and pissed everywhere, you have every right to come at me like this. But that didn't happen. And then there was this like moment where I stopped and I was like, maybe this is what like abuelo and abuela and like mom and dad had to deal with when they came to America. Like I'm making nice, trying to speak the language. I know she speaks the language, and she's using that as leverage against me. And it's only multiplied by this being in the form of like food retail. There's a register, there's a counter, you
Yeah.
know? And to feel that on like North American soil was it's like it's the polar opposite of like seeing third world conditions on American soil, like when you go to the hood or parts of the South,
Yeah. Yeah.
Midwest, you know, or like just go outside any major city for 3.5 hours, you could find hell blasted landscape, missing copper wiring on American soil.
Hmm.
So I've been to Canada before, and it always fascinated me, and how like I hope this doesn't sound cliche, but um I felt safer in Canada, but I didn't feel free.
Yeah,
It's
no,
deep.
that's kind of been I've been many times, including recently, pretty strictly on the Ontario side. Never really been far into Quebec. I've never been to Montreal.
Mm.
But yeah, it's I like it a lot. First of all, let me say you hear a lot of bad things about Canada. There's a lot of bad things to say about it politically, and a lot of bad things to say about some of the kind of Canadian urbanite culture. But obviously, the outdoor stuff is great, and yeah, it's kind of a fascinating place as you said with Montreal because it's distinctly North American. You wouldn't mistake yourself for being on any other continent, and in some ways, it is sort of an extension of the United States. Well, not so much Quebec, but the rest of it, like Ontario, is kind of an
Oh
extension.
yeah, yeah,
But
and
there's
then
these little differences. You feel like you're in the Commonwealth because you are, and you're under the
yeah,
Queen's protection. You feel safe but less free, as you said, and it is cleaner, and there are these kind of interesting northern elements. It's just these little, kind of like I was saying with California earlier, too, in a completely different way. It's like there's these subtle differences that you kind of just have to experience. Um, and I
oh
am a
yeah.
Canada fan. I'll say that I was really charmed. I hadn't been in like 5 years, and I went this like 3 weeks ago, actually. And
Ah, how was it?
I was kind of in a very outdoorsy area, so that's not necessarily representative of the nation as a whole. But man, I grew up going there a lot, and I was kind of like, and I hadn't really thought about it so much in the time that I
Oh,
hadn't been there
nice.
when it was
Were
shut down for
you
COVID or anything.
were,
But I was kind of
were you
recharmed
hunting?
by it.
Were you hunting for Sasquatch in Calgary?
Not exact. Well, let's say that I was because I don't want to totally dox where I was. But yeah, I was in an outdoorsy area, and I
oh,
was
that's lovely, man.
recharmed by Canada.
And
I
and
guess.
and and for the record, I know I made Canada out to be some sort of like desolate post-national, homogenized landscape. But the process of how I got around to writing this was I'm talking to Mr. Marchant, and he because like for a while I used to joke about how like Canadian like we first of all we need like a Madiel boat lift to get like the Canadian dissidents out of the country and give them refuge in America, like Mr. Gio Penachetta. Like
Hmm.
we need our favorite and best leads to like get them like refugee or political exile status in America, just so the that country becoming a parody of a parody will not consume some of our best and brightest minds.
Hmm.
Our top
And I used
guys,
Because
shall we
there are a
say?
lot
yes,
of great Canadians.
yes,
Let's say that. Yeah.
hell, dude, Norm Macdonald was not only an honorary American hero, but the funniest man who ever walked the earth was a fucking leaf. Think about that,
Yeah.
Damn.
right?
Uh,
So, I used to joke about how like Canadian refugees would be among some of the most grateful human beings on earth, and their neighbors would never understand why. Um, through my shithead internet friends and the time I spent there, I did get to see a number of things that really dispelled the myth and the image that Canada has, because part of what they export is their image, really.
mhm.
And because it's not unless you're in Canada that you realize, oh, they're not just collectively nice and polite. I think they're just better at following orders on a wide scale collectively, better than like the average, like, corn syrup fed gun toting American who
Yeah,
opens
yeah.
fire at national disasters during the national anthem. So, I was able to finally put all of these things, not to like exercise them, but to finally like state them. Like a couple of things I noticed is how Canadians have a lot of opinions about America, and most Americans don't know a thing about Canada other than like Wayne Gretzky and Norm Macdonald and William Shatner and
Yeah.
maple syrup. Canadians have a lot to say about America, but they couldn't tell you a fucking thing about what's happening in like Arkansas or Tennessee or like the 81st district of the Bronx, or Queens. They couldn't because like they not America is Canada's identity built into their fucking constitution
Yeah.
because like not America was basically like, nah, we're still gonna have the queen on our gay plastic money in the future, and then they wrote the Constitution. So no, and it's kind of funny too because like Canada also had like a Wild West, like an Old West, but like our Old West was filled with like cult leaders and con men and a lot of
Yeah.
violence. And over there, it was just like French Canadian pelt farmers, in a fucking
Yeah.
canoe going like,
Yeah.
we have an ethno state. Um, I've always found it funny how Canada has spent so many fucking resources over so many decades for an indignant population that outside of where they mostly live in Quebec, like imagine the three people in Winnipeg who speak French and they make a noise and they're really angry and indignant because they go to the DMV and no one can speak French. Hell, because if you want to run for public office in Canada, you have to be bilingual. Like it's such a weird like the Canada is so weirdly beholden to the French. I guess because they are the first minority built into their constitution that way. But no, it's a really weird. Second of all, like Canadians have more in common with their fucking American neighbor to the south than they do to the province next door.
Yeah, no
Like
doubt. Yeah.
the provinces of Canada are all like weird separate parts of a world map. But like
Yeah.
I kind of touched on this in the first vignette of
Oh
my
yeah,
piece,
yeah. And that was
Sunshine.
surprising to me because I didn't really think of Canada. I knew that like Alberta is very different from say Quebec, but like I
Yeah.
didn't realize that like yeah, I guess people from Newfoundland they have
Oh,
a different culture than people from Ontario.
right. But on top of that, like different provinces have put up like tariffs on one another. Like the ethanol for the truck in Calgary has to be this percentage, but then the ethanol in this. There's a at Mr. Marchant's recommendation when I bought up the Canadian refugee thing, he was like, "Have you ever heard of Sunshine Sketches of a Small Canadian Town?" And I'm like, "No." And you'll have to excuse my ignorance. I don't remember offhand the author, but it was basically like every 2-3 pages were like different vignettes of all these characters in a small Canadian town um, in the early 1900s, and it's like beautifully written. And even though all the vignettes are sort of overlapped with one another, so like how like an episode of King of the Hill, like everyone has their own storyline, but they all intertwine and
Yeah,
overlap.
yeah.
And right, it's like that. There was this like weird, homely, small town prairie feeling to it all. That kind of reminded me of like old American frontiers type, high trust society while we murder the Indians kind of feel to it. Which, by the way, like Canada treats their Indians worse than America, which is no small feat. That is like, I mean, Australia is the world heavyweight champion of going fuck the Indians. America, unfortunately, number third. Canada's number two. Nothing to slouch at. Also, Canada has a higher arson rate than America. I think it's in their blood because Canada
Huh.
burnt down the original White House. Um, Also, people don't get
Interesting.
murdered. People don't go murdered in Canada; they go missing. That's why it has such a low murder rate because they're just listed as missing, so no one raises eyebrows. I read Sunshine Sketches of a Small Canadian Town, and I'm like, this is genius, but I can't have the lives of these people fleeing Canada overlap. So how about this? Everyone is just fucking catapulted or slingshot or smuggled or exiled out of the country. So I kind of served it where like we forget that Canada is part of the British Commonwealth, all right? And like the Commonwealth has been shrinking over time. So because of years of depleted resources for this indignant minority that has been just dwindling away at royal coffers, also
Yeah.
because hey, things are getting so expensive. People are unhappy about like the Chinese lung herpes gene altering mystery fluid mandates. Hey, you know what'll make everyone feel better? Invading fucking Quebec. All right, that'll make everyone feel better. And but you see, one thing I learned through the trucker convoy ordeal is that every checkpoint between America and Canada has like thermal scanners. So you can't be smuggling people in and out. And I'm like, well, what can get all the thermal scanners out of the border and to make sure nothing comes in or out of Quebec, specifically Montreal? And I'm like, oh, good old fashioned war. Okay. So there had always been separatist sentiment in that corner of Canada. They truly do see themselves in an entirely different entity, and like rightfully so. But like there is, wow, they're French and Canadian, so that means they're obnoxious and boring. Try the veal, folks. I'm here till Friday. So I figured, okay, that removes all the thermal shit outside the border. Now it's like fair game. It's open season, and now people can get out of the country. And like one guy liquidates his 401k and his MetaMask and sells everything he can to get out of there. There was one vignette I'm particularly proud of where like Frank Castle wins the Nobel Prize.
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah. Because like, what's the Frank Castle connection here? Because he's obviously like an internet celebrity, and I'm reading this. I'm just like, oh, how'd this guy get into his story?
Well, not to toot my own horn here, but my very first mutual on Twitter is a gentleman by the name of Newworks. All right, and he edited some video for Frank Castle back in the day. So you know how $1 Million Extreme videos would sometimes have like accompanying text, where it'll just be like a wall of text for like half a second.
Yeah,
and you have to pause it to read it.
Yeah.
Time goes by, and Newworks is editing some videos for Frank, and Frank's like, I need some writing and I need some text, and Newworks is like, I know a guy. So on the Providence Pride Parade Frank Castle video, and
I know that one.
Pride.
Yeah.
That's
and in the one where he has the press pass, I think in Atlanta. I think he's just like walking around in public with a GoPro. At one point, he screams at someone going, "He's got a knife!" And like he clearly doesn't. Right. So for those two videos, I sent some writing, a lot of which he used. So that, and you know what? Frank was really nice enough to be like, when the second video was uploaded, he just tweeted like, "Oh, it was edited by this and this, audio done by this," and then a follow-up tweet going, "and writing done by this guy." No, that was the first time. The second time, he was like, "Follow this man."
That's awesome.
Nice.
And then I got some followers who, some became mutuals I'm still in touch with. One became a really good homie of mine. There's a guy named Matty Furious who's edited videos for MDE and Frank Castle, and he pivoted and became this ridiculous full-time crypto artist who, like, listen, I don't know the first thing about art or art theory. I'm an uncultured slob. I likes what I likes and I know what I likes, all right?
Yeah.
But like I collaborated with Matty Furious in making some like Super Predator NFTs, and the sale of one of those was the startup capital I needed to make Queen's Trash.
That's awesome.
And
wow.
and this guy is like a ridiculous artist whose shit I can't come up with of like a peer or an equal. And we crossed paths because fucking Frank Castle was like, follow this guy.
Yeah. Well, you must know John Pellick as well then, right?
Oh yeah.
He's a friend of mine in Meat Space here in LA.
Oh, that's lovely.
Please
tell him I send regards.
I will. Yeah.
So I figured, you know what, like at no point was Frank obligated to do that. At no point was he obligated to, like, in fact, like I remember one time I hassled him for a retweet, pun intended, and like and he did so within seconds, and I was like, holy shit, that was really cool. And he was like, nah, bro, like it's no big deal. And like, because I understand how some people are weird about asking for that, or like weird about getting those requests, but like I was a nobody and he had a sizable following at the time, and he's got like an even bigger one now, but like now I'm one step above nobody. So like sometimes, hey, can you retweet this? And it's like, hey, you don't suck. All right, come on in. You know, I try to be at
I,
least
I
as,
dare say you have helped me, Haynes, in that regard with some very propulsive tweets. So
nah,
thank you
bro.
very much.
If it's over the fence, it's a home run. Like I don't. It doesn't like no, dude. That shit's fucking hilarious. You kidding me?
Thank you,
So
man.
so so no. I figured, all right, to make sure no one knows of any war crimes or atrocities carried out by the Canadian military against the French Canadians, there would be like an internet kill switch, like a blackout or something. But nature finds a way. So the only footage being captured of this entire ordeal is Frank Castle and his GoPro. All right. So he ends up reluctantly against the wills of the establishment and the powers that be. He wins the Nobel Prize, and John Pellick accepts the award in his place and reads the Navy SEAL copy pasta to a quiet audience that doesn't get it. And then he meets up with Frank Castle, and Frank Castle orders a fucking bacon, egg, and cheese, and he already has the GoPro running. And the guy behind the counter is like 350. He's like, no, I should get it for free. I'm a war hero. And the guy just kind of like, all right, just he seemed familiar from the Facebook videos. Even the old timers knew what this man's deal was. That big fella that went to Canada that won some award that no one wants to give. Even the Dominican bodega owner was able to piece this together. And he just kind of shrugs his shoulders and slides the bacon, egg, and cheese across the counter. So yeah, I mean, listen, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. So it was really fun to write this, because yeah, I was able to exercise all these not grievances, but things I noticed that were startlingly different between America and Canada.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other, and honestly, I don't have anything to say bad about the country, but like I finally understand why Cubans, they're like, hey, we love Americans, but fuck America.
Yeah.
So like I get it now. It's like, hey, like Canadians for the most part have been some of the dopest, sharpest, funniest, considerate people I've ever met. And I don't mean polite, considerate. I just mean like facetious,
Yeah.
But like fuck Canada. Like
yeah.
Now, did you start writing this before Ukraine? Because it's kind of like eerily prescient of we have a big European war going on now, and like with a refugee situation. And so I'm reading this and it's kind of like, well, what if that war were taking place in the country least likely to ever have an armed conflict? Well, maybe not these days, but it certainly has that stereotype. And so I'm wondering, was this influenced by the festivities in Ukraine?
Oh no. That was a lovely and splendid accident. That's what I mean by like failing upward. Like this started with me posting fucking trucker memes into the void, and then I get asked to like be a part of this thing. Which, by the way, there were some people like Geo wrote a piece, Mountain Dandy wrote a piece, Dogbot wrote a piece before he got nuked. People wrote gold that I'm really, really, really proud of to have like stand shoulder to shoulder with. This guy just gave me a shot based on nothing, really. Like, which is kind of like looking back on it, it's like, wow, you gambled everything on pictures I was posting after this political thing that got crushed under heel. Like, and you're asking me for words? Okay. Which, what a weird, insane gamble, which turned out to be a hell of a lateral move, I suppose. So, being able to put these thoughts to rest, I suppose,
For sure.
like I always wanted to write about this to some degree. I just didn't know how. Like, all right, like have you fellas ever seen like the George Romero like Of the Dead series?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like he kind of sort of touches on things like race and class and how all you need is a minor fuck up for people to lose all common sense. It's just like the window dressing is zombie apocalypse,
Yeah.
So this turned out to be a very not to beat a dead horse, but like it was serendipitous because like, wow, look at this thing that's happening in Canada. LOL, truck memes. And then a week later, hey, you want to write for this thing? And you know what? Like not doing it was not an option. Like
Absolutely.
It quite literally came crashing through my roof and landed on my doorstep.
Yep.
So it was
Just like that.
it was excellent timing, and yeah, I'm glad it struck a chord. I've had a couple of Leafs reach out to me and be like, "Wow, like you seem to have your finger on the pulse. Like, what's representation to Canada? Like,
Yeah.
how do you know?" And I'm not claiming to be any like specialist or shit an expert or anything. It's just like, look, honestly, fellas, like I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I'm pretty good at paying attention. I'm pretty good at noticing things, and I know I'm good at expressing
Noticer.
myself. Yeah, and I'm pretty good at. I know I'm good at expressing myself, whether it's like talkity talk or writing or with images. So I felt that I knew I wouldn't be the only person who would read that and be like, yeah, pretty much. Like yeah, it is like that. And I tried really hard to make each vignette be like believable. They all weren't just like white people. Like there was like not only a French Canadian woman who just gets her day ruined at a Texas diner, because because think about it, like now fucking Americans have to pay tax dollars to fucking shelter these refugees they didn't vote for. Fucking ungrateful Canadians with their han han wee wee. And then the French Canadians got some fucking nerve when they come here because they're like, we're your neighbors. We live next door to you. Can't you recognize our accent? And it's like, no, because they've never been to your country. What the fuck does your accent have to do with keeping the lights on? They're and this, so you see, this French Canadian still retained their indignity when being so graciously all right. So, but then there was also a vignette of a man who left Montreal because he has like he stutters and he has a learning disability, so he can't learn French, and his life is a fucking living hell. And like the treatment of people who don't speak French in that part of Canada, like it's fucking horrifying. And no one ever talks about it. Kind of like there are problems in every country no one wants to talk about. Like in how Japan, there's a homeless problem no one wants to talk about, and part of it is to save face. But also like the diaper manufacturers in Japan, their biggest customers are now the elderly. No one talks about this. All right. So like in Canada, first of all, yeah, there is racism. Okay, of course, there's racism everywhere. But the weirdest discrimination and antagonization of people are the French-speaking French Canadians towards those who don't speak French in Montreal.
Interesting.
It's really cutthroat and heartless. So no, like all these idiosyncrasies and all these little small details, yeah, I fictionalized them, but like I'm really proud. In fact, like this has kind of been not the underpinning of a lot of my work, but like, listen, first of all, I wouldn't sell anything I wouldn't personally wear or buy or want to read. All right. And especially with the writing stuff. Like, so like I guess I I wanted to like, and this means a lot to me to do it with writing, because like shirts are one thing, flyers are another. The zine is really touching when people hit me up and they're like, wow, like this is incredible, this is great, keep up the good work. Okay, and that's always like that always makes a good day great, and not so good days even better. But what makes it so profound for me is that like it validates me going through with it in the first place.
Yeah.
Like I knew it was a good idea out the gate, and then people responding this way, like, no, you are simply confirming or reaffirming this notion that kind of got it moving in the first place. So to even write about something so far outside my wheelhouse, like fucking Canada, and again, I'm no expert, I've only been there twice, but like it left an impression on me. So honestly, if it wasn't for Bill March, this last section of this program would have just been me quoting The Simpsons out of context, and Matt quietly sharpening a knife, going like, "Oh damn, you said this guy was cool, and you hung out with him, and he's just like some fucking asshole, and he just like I don't even." He's even quoting the older shitty seasons. What's his problem? But no, I'm so glad you enjoyed the book.
No, it's really good. And I don't know if we hit on Cars and Women enough and Super Predator, but what you have here is really special too. Like Cars and
Thank you,
Women,
man.
yeah, this issue that you gave me the other night, you could say a little thing about how you say that every issue is unique. And so I saw what you meant by that because you gave me the issue and you opened it up, and there's a space from the desk of Stained Haynes where you write personal messages in there. And so I've got this one right here. Year of our Lord, August 4th, 2022. Dan Baltic received this by hand, his number one guy. And yeah, no, I
Whoa,
mean it's
Dan
great.
Baltic needs me.
Dan Baltic does need you.
You
Needs you
know,
for the pod.
you know what, man? No two copies are alike because part of my shtick, and you know what? I've been waiting for Haynes to tell me to go fuck myself and send me a cease and desist letter, but it doesn't happen. Whenever I post a Gutsto Girl shirt, I always tag the Utz Pretzel Company in it on Instagram and on Twitter, and I'm waiting for the day they send me a cease and desist letter and tell me to stop. But they're surprisingly cool with it. All right. Um. So
Interesting.
with the screen printed shirts, no two are alike because I could do 100 of the same writing with the spare prohibited keep hopes up shirt, but there will always be like a slight discrepancy in each of those 100. You know.
Yeah,
So with the zine, um, to sort of ensure that quality control, um, because like if the two of you were to be hanging out and you're both wearing like take like a respect troops shirt, okay, even if they were both black ink on white shirts, there would still be like even the slightest, like the paint is a little off on a corner or this is bolder than the rest. All right, the zine works the same way, but I figured like, all right, this is the written word, so not only is this the literal written word because I'm writing it by hand, is also the written word where like the proverbial written word, people's submissions and my writing and the editor's writing all compiled. Cars and Women magazine started out because, how much time do I got left? I think I could speed run this story.
yeah. No, we got time.
All right. Let me try and make this as coherent as possible.
Yeah.
So once upon a time, there was a website called encyclopedia.zone, and I joined the forums, and I found out about the forums because once upon a time there was Hide Wars episode 17, and the guest
All
was
right.
Dr. Don Jolly, who at the time was the editor-in-chief of Dagger magazine. It's sort of like the Paris Review of literature, shit posts. And it was great. And 3 issues were released, and then issue 4 was physical, and it's a fucking work of art. The Dagger Mag forums, I was only on the tail end of, but it was nothing like it I'd ever seen. And it was like a weird Web 4.0, like a return to HTML. Back
Yeah.
when, you needed screen names and passwords. And um, so part of the beauty of the site is that to join, to have full access of the forums and MChat, you had to audition. You had to send like a 200 word post or like a picture, a song, something you made. And if the editor liked it, you were in. There was a quality control just for the people and like who interacted and used the site. So on the site and the forums, it was Operation Super Predator. And then when the site migrated from Dagger because it got sold to these dudes in Hawaii, Don Jolly moved ship, and then we're in encyclopedia.zone. So that's where Super Predator starts. And Don Jolly was nice enough to just like cut off a piece of the website and be like, hey, y'all could use this. Just don't leave any motorcycle tire tracks on the ceiling. And yeah, so superpredator.zone. We got our own wing of the site. It started out, it was sort of meant to be, imagine a zine made entirely of people who got nothing but rejection letters. and they realized this zine would not be this would not be necessary if the world wasn't the way it is right now. And there's nothing I can really compare it to. I still get people who hit me up over Super Prep, and for the record, don't go to this website on your phone. It was intentionally made to not be mobile friendly.
Yeah,
Um,
I can confirm this.
so so it so and I'm really grateful that I could put it on my resume, and my work involved with it still holds up very well. So we do this, and then we start getting submissions, and we were kind of hoping it would, grow legs and take shape in other different ways. We didn't expect people like, when's part two coming out? Because it was like in the back of issue one, it was sort of like, hey, Super Predator's public domain. Add to Super Predator. Take away from Super Predator. Post Super Predator on bus stops because no one owns the truth. In fact, if you edit it or add or take away from it, it makes it even more true. Have fun.
Yeah, yeah.
Take it. Run with it. And then it sort of became a thing of its own. So then issue two happened. And around that time, Trump got elected. No. Trump was in office. Biden got elected. And I'm not going to lie to
All
you.
right.
Like, no one saw Biden winning the election. It's just sort of sad how, like, it's so under, even Super Predator was caught off guard. So then the Capitol Hill thing happened, and that was the last online update. And then here's what happened, okay? So, from February, March, and April to May, we would have like meetings where it would be like all the founding members and the head of every department. I'll just try to make this as quick as possible. Let's say we're all in Super Predator. The editor in chief is like, all right, go. What do you got? And you, Dan, you're like, all right, we should have more Alex Jones public access live streams with call-ins because now we have a video puppet rig and a burner phone to take even more calls. All right, Matt, what you got? And you're like, all right, we need more online content because a lot of the traffic funnels in through the website. And then through the website, that's where people end up in distribution, print copies, looking at other links and articles. All right, Wells, what do you got? We should really be working on number 3, the physical copy of number 3. You really need to be working on that. And then you go down the boardroom table. And then, all right, you, Haynes, what do you got? And I'm like, I keep getting people saying they want the things on coffee mugs and shirts. So I've had to tell 17 people to go fuck themselves because I don't have an answer for that. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of NFTs, but like people are making good money making digital dog shit, and what we do is better than digital dog shit. I would wager it's better than okay. So I don't mean to compromise anyone's artistic integrity here, but there are a number of moves we could be making, and I believe we should be looking into these things. And then we repeat that in March, and then we repeat it in April, and then we repeat it in May. At some point during all of this, well, before this, I was elected community outreach for Super Predator. I didn't vote. There was an election, and they were like, "Yeah, this guy talks to people with a fucking luchador mask in public. He's good with talkity talk. He's in." So that's how I got a number of submissions, and that's how a few people became fellow Super Predators. One of them being Anatomy of the Heads, aka A of the H on Twitter. And he's like, hey, and a tale as old as time. Hey man, I love your site. Hey, thanks. What's up? And that's not my site, but I'm a founding member. Oh, cool. Hey, and all right. And, hey, so what about these submission things? And I'm like, you know what? Fuck it, dude. Give it to me, and I'll give it to the editor by hand. So A of the H holds the record of sending us something, and then I hand it to the editor. And minutes later, the editor's like, get me pictures of Spider-Man. What's this man's story? What's his deal? What's he like? Where's he from? This is very good writing. Keep him on board. Put him in the Rolodex. And it's like, we've worked to the death with deadlines hanging over our heads, and this guy never fucking budged for a thing. I sent him A of the H's writing, and this guy, like, he's jumping up and down, and now he's threatening me by text message. So that's when I knew, like, oh wow, like there's got to be something to this guy. So we talked, we got to know each other, and like, he saw some of the same weird shit I saw growing up, like Freakazoid, The Tick.
Oh yeah, no, I love those.
Yeah, and it's funny because like you know how Exotica music is like a bunch of honkies imagining what the jungle music is like. So like him and his band is like inverse world music where like imagine 3 dudes in a sweaty Indonesian jungle, but they like Steely Dan and black metal and like early Mr. Bungle. So it's like inverse Exotica music. So no, he hits me up one day and he's like, dude, let's just start our own thing. And that was like almost a year ago. Yeah. In fact, when issue 6 drops, it'll be 1 year
Oh,
of
sweet.
Cars and Women magazine. Yeah, and
And so what you have here, you have poetry, you have fiction, you have commentary, and it's all done in this kind of like DIY real zine format. So like what we were talking about earlier, there's a magazine revolution. A New Right listener, Corporate Clark, tweeted about this. But I like to think that Cars and Women is and Super Predator, you really channeling the spirit of the '90s scenes, and that's cool to see.
oh, I appreciate that, man. Thank you. The aesthetics are a very deliberate choice. I have to give a lot of credit to well, the art department of Super Predator. They're like just flawless. But A of the H, he's responsible for the layout of Cars and Women magazine. Of course, being a fellow Super Predator doesn't hurt in terms of like taste and aesthetics. But he's just so all right. Quick little story about A of the H, all right, fellas. So
Yeah,
I find it fascinating how this guy who lives on the other end of the earth that I've never been the same physical room as, like, we've collaborated on things. Like, I've given him vocals for stuff to put on like the Ngram Records compilation, like with his band Anatomy of the Heads.
yeah,
Like I've put up flyers of like his stuff like in my city. Like we got this thing up and running, and he's the architect of queenstrash.com actually. Like that's
yeah.
why the website and the zine sort of go like fit like hand in glove. So like even though collaborating and doing all these things are like easy peasy 1 2 3, here's a perfect example of like language barrier. So like, and it's no one's fault. I just think it's hilarious. Like one day he DMs me on Twitter and he's like, "Hey man, I need your help. Can you help me come up with a good header for this email?" And for like an hour and a half, I'm like, "What the fuck is a header?" And I
Yeah.
even and it's not until I realize like, oh, that's how people outside America, that's what they call the subject in the email. And I lose an hour and a fucking half over like such a, even though like we've made music and art and this thing that people subscribe to that I handwrite and I mail with a thank you letter, and I'm always harassing the ladies at the post office at like 4:57 p.m. every day. Like and I'm the reason they're late a couple of minutes because and yet he's like, "Hey, can you help me figure out a fucking header?" The fuck is a header? This fucking guy. What? Who the fuck does this Indonesian doctor do? What the fuck kind of low level you've been punked? Kind of. Am I on candid camera? Does this cocksucker have my fucking living room bugged? Header. What the fuck does that? And then an hour goes by, and I'm like, oh, it's subject. Derp.
Yeah.
Like that's
Yeah.
right. So no. Just the trials and tribulations of making art and willing things into existence. Like that's just remember, folks. Common goals outweigh common interest, and once two or more people are involved in something, communication is the most important thing. I'm living proof.
You're doing a great job of it, Haynes. And yeah, just again for everyone, Cars and Women magazine, Queen's Trash, 718 TV. These are, the type them into Google. You're gonna find what you need to find, and you're going to find awesome shirts. You're gonna find these great DIY zines. And Haynes, you're producing like real, real guerrilla art, I would say, and that's cool shit.
Thank you, man. I think I will say one thing though. Matt, the things we kind of discussed earlier about like, this like gritty, real in your face thing becoming like canonized into this like, neoliberal globo homo gay
Yeah.
oligarchy centrist bland one size fits all like ordeal.
Yeah.
I'll be the first to admit, if like Hot Topic cut me a check for it's okay to be infected, if there are enough zeros on that check, I'll take it. I'll
Mhm.
take
Of
it.
course. Yeah.
And I would rather it be in the hands of like Hot Topic than like now it's being used by DARPA or some shit. Which let's be honest, DARPA will cut me a check with even more zeros, but like I can't. That's like nah, that like that DARPA has the strength of like 11 fucking DC Beltway think tanks. All right, no, like I assure you that even if Hot Topic cuts me a check for it's okay to be infected, I'll still be putting up flyers until I need medical assistance in doing so. Like there are other things I'd like to do. Don't get me wrong, but like some of my best ideas have come from putting up flyers. So
Yeah.
like now I have no reason not to do it. I don't know about you fellas, but like this whole thing has been very empowering for me because it all started as like shit I used to daydream about when I was like at work. And then I
Oh,
put up
100%. Yeah. I mean,
and
that's what, like, it's been a year for us with New Right. And, like, it's amazing to see this journey and to, like, to go to parties like these expat parties
Mhm.
and people are like, oh, you're Dan Baltic. Oh, I listen to New Right. And that's fucking amazing. That's amazing to hear that. And so, like, you walk around, you see people wearing your shirts. That's, we've both come a long way in a short period of time.
yeah, yeah,
And I think that might be a good note to kind of bounce on because unfortunately, I think Matt has to get going.
Yeah, another minute or so.
no,
Yeah,
no,
no, yeah.
Matt has to go ghost women on Tinder who lie about their age. So he's gonna put on some pants and then be like, "All right, babe, I'm on the way," and then just delete number block.
Absolutely. These are my weekend plans.
But
Before I bounce, I guess, or before we wrap things up, I don't know if you want to, Dan. I did see the one last thing we didn't address on the outline was the luchador mask.
oh yeah.
Yeah, is that?
Oh
Did you wear
yeah.
that all the time at like these expat readings and whatnot?
No. I depending on the social setting, like for like so at the expat readings, I mean like I met a gentleman by the name of Scott, whose apartment was the fucking reading was held at. Um, I had the pleasure of meeting him through Twitter, and he had set up a number of readings. Him and excuse my ignorance, the guy who looks like Fidel Castro, the Latino.
Manny.
Uh,
Manny.
yes,
Manny, he's
thank
a
you.
former guest, Manny
Yeah.
Marrero.
Right. Excuse my ignorance, because
No,
I
no.
only met him once at a reading last summer, actually. So no. I had the pleasure of meeting Scott through Twitter. So it just like and hey, like we hung out. We're both friends with this. We have a homie named Roman D'Ambrosio. Uh,
Uh,
stand-up guy, by the way. He's a playwright and he's written gold. And he actually
Oh
sent
right, he was
us.
just on the Beautiful Toilet, Nick Dollins'
Yeah,
podcast. Yeah.
yeah. He sent us a one-act play for issue 4 of Cars and Women called
oh,
Gorilla
sweet.
Days, and it's flawless. And we occasionally get emails where people are like, "Not enough Roman in issue 5. What the fuck is your problem,
Yeah.
fatty?" And I'm like, "Thanks for subscribing." Like I don't know why they feel like entitled shareholders, but okay, I'll see what I could do. But no. So like if it's someone I know and I've met and we've hung out or at least have spent time around one another, yeah, like I'll pull through like under like normal circumstances. If I don't know a person, like for example, one time Roman and I crashed an art gallery and we didn't know anyone there, so it was like, all right, wearing the mask is better than just like, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it sometimes depends on the set and setting. I'm always surprised how receptive people are to the mask, even in public, even like in the fucking street.
Yeah, well,
Like
it is iconic. I mean, my comment on it is, Dan, you and I have talked about like if and when we'd ever have the opportunity to like a video podcast or like other people do those, and like what if we got invited? What would you do? What would I do? Because we don't really face fag, so to speak. But it seems like something like a luchador mask where it's because you don't want to be like some lame thing where you're like just censoring your face. That seems a little self-important or something. But if you go ahead and actually have like an iconic thing that you always do, like a luchador mask, there you go. You've kind of cracked the code.
Oh,
So
well,
it's not a bad look.
well, part
No,
of
not
it
at all.
And thank you. I mean, I think part of it. Well, first of all, there is this difficult to articulate but beautiful, mildly sinister, and kind of cool aesthetic of just like dudes wearing masks or just like
Totally.
masks in
Yeah.
general. All right. And there's something particularly, I don't know what to call it, but once you have two or more people and everyone is wearing masks, there's like it's something in the air you can't quite put your finger on. It's mildly sinister, but very
Eyes
cool
wide
and
shut.
badass.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, or when you see like the fucking Basque separatist movement, and it's like 50 dudes in the woods, all with balaclavas and black masks. Like that's like it's kind of dope. I'm not saying ISIS is cool, but like they're wearing masks, they know what they're doing. So
Oh yeah, aesthetics matter.
guys, you know what mask I'm wearing? I'm
That-
wearing a Shiba Inu mask.
nice. If you could find a Baltic hat, like it's on. It's on.
Exactly.
So-
it's
so-
a Doge hat, I think.
You,
Like
you
the
need-
Doge of Italy.
You need to find an Estonian shepherd's hat
I
to really
do.
complete it. The mask. Well, how I got the mask is a bit of a story, and we could probably end on that. But just very quickly,
Sure.
I felt I needed something, for lack of a better term, semi-anonymity, because like, look, I've been saying and writing what I've been saying and writing ever since I got out of high school. And for the most part, no one gave a shit. But it is funny how I put on a luchador mask and I go from nobody to the guy talking mad shit on Twitter to the flyer guy to the shirt guy to the Cars and Women magazine guy to the Stop Tomboy Genocide guy in like 2.5 years. So far, not bad. I will say the mask is sort of a very easily and identifiable way to like identify me, like because there are masks, yeah, but like luchador masks are a unique and particular cultural touchstone in Mexico, and also like luchador masks. In fact, the whole luchador mythos and everything, it's kind of just on an aesthetic level, it's kind of cool and dope and awesome. It's like a living pulp comic, like character come to life. So
Yeah.
so I wanted to do things and I've been able to do things like live streams and do things on the internet. And I used to do videos on Twitter while I would just read into my phone and upload that. Like I'd read from my notebooks and shit. I want to do more of that, but like that wouldn't be possible without the mask. And like you said, if I were to just blur my face out, like that would be really, unless I really commit 100%, then it's like, like, hello, I'm in witness protection program and my face is all blurred out.
Again, like Banksy was in that documentary.
Yeah.
A little, not, some people do that, obviously. Dan used to disguise his voice, but like,
Yeah,
I don't know. Luchador mask is more fun.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what happens is once upon a time I was dating this girl who was a gigantic weeb, all right?
Mhm.
And one of her favorite things was a Sailor Moon. So for
Right.
Halloween,
Of course.
she dressed up, which like by the way, like yeah, I know everyone has a fun time in their city on Halloween, and I'm sure it's fun in LA, but like Halloween in New York
yeah.
City is kind of fucking ridiculous. And on top of that, like even though there's a village Halloween day parade, which really is worth people's time and attention to go check out, because part of the
Yeah.
joy is anyone can walk into the parade. Queens has its own Halloween day parade, which like of course it's like the equivalent of like the Staten Island Yankees compared to the actual Yankees, but it's like it's a beautiful slice of Queens trash.
Mhm.
What's your excuse, Brooklyn, Mr. Baltic? Huh? All right, I'll make noise.
No, we gotta keep up here. We gotta do a Park Slope Halloween parade.
So
Be the gayest parade in the city.
oh no, ours is in Jackson Heights, which is one of the highest LGBT populations. So good luck.
Seriously, Jackson
luck.
Heights?
Good luck trying to out gay us, buddy. I forget if it's in East Elmhurst or Jackson Heights, but in one of those areas, it's a particularly high percentage of LGBTQ people, which again, super diverse, and no one picks on them because everyone self-segregates and everyone knows better. All right. Not all New
Right.
Yorkers are like angry, cursing. I'm fucking walking here, like guys who's willing to run you over. Just some of them. So, At the
Just the
time,
good ones.
yeah, the honest ones. So no. So I wanted something. I needed something to put over my work clothing because at the time, and this is the only real thing I miss about going into an office, getting to dress up like I'm a fucking goon because
Yeah.
my uniform for the longest time just used to be like, trench coat, like slacks and shirt and tie and briefcase. And if all of that is black except the shirt, well, the shirt is white. Oh, like people can't tell if you're like, are you here to collect on some oops insurance for the Bonanno family? Or like, are you Homeland Security? What's your deal? Um, so I needed
For
something to wear.
our listeners who have not met Haynes, he has the physicality of a refrigerator. He is very formidable. So that's yeah, in
Yeah,
a
so
big way, not you know what I mean.
oh
Being
no,
complimentary. Yeah.
I appreciate that, man. So yeah, so if I dress up on top of that, now everyone thinks like, like is someone here to get hurt or arrested, like or shook down, and it's always weird to see like it's always weird to see kids cutting school quiet down and get on their best behavior if I'm on the train because it's like no kids, continue dumping out the blunt guts on the fucking floor. I'm not gonna snitch on you. You go. Anyway, so I needed something to put over my work clothing, and I go to Halloween City, which is not far from Union Square. Now, I don't know if this makes sense to you two gentlemen or any of the ladies and jerks listening at home, but let's say you're cooking and you need a lime, and you go to the supermarket, and there's like a pyramid of limes, but like one lime in particular like presents itself to you like
Mhm.
one lime in particular like your eye is immediately drawn to
Sure.
and like and if you're lucky you look away and it's hard because your eye goes back to it, all right? So
Yeah.
that same way I walk into Halloween City and I go to the section which is just an entire wall of masks, and it was like in West Side Story, where like the fucking Guinea Dago Wop falls in love with Maria, and it goes all like soft
Yeah.
focus, and it's like love at first sight, and it's also right. So all the other masks just faded away to my peripheral and became blurry, and it just as if it were revealing itself to me. This blue luchador mask with like the silver trim on the eyes and the nose and the mouth, and I remember getting it off the little like hook it was on, and I pay for it, and the woman's like, "Would you like a bag?" And I said, "No, thanks. I'll wear it out." And I take it out the
Very
package,
cool.
and I walk out, and I remember upon exiting Halloween City, there was a couple that walked by, and it was immediately like, "Oh yeah, mira, el blue demon," and thus began this evening of like husbands and boyfriends who are now flipping out, like mostly of Mexican heritage, of course, but even like little Mexican kids are like, "Etal blue demon, etal blue demon," and now I'm like flexing and doing the Hulk Hogan poses with all these like, well, basically the kids and the father of a woman who's like, oh, just every fucking year, like just like ever so solemnly putting up with their shit and my shit. But no, I was overwhelmed at the positive response to it. Even people who had no frame of reference to luchadors, like it's because like listen, not to brag, but like it's kind of cool when you wear a shirt and someone's like, bro, that's a cool shirt in public, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
so it's kind of like empowering. Like if someone's like, yo, that's a sick mask, son. Excuse me, I will strut for the next few blocks. I'm gonna ride this out for a while. And sometimes not to brag, but even like women will be like wink and smile, and it's like every once in a while a woman will be brave. Do you wear the
Nice.
mask? Do you wear the mask all the time? And it's like I don't kiss. And it's like I don't kiss and tell. And the mask does a lot of heavy lifting at times, I will admit. But
Yeah.
but no, it's sort of the mask began as a choice out of necessity, and now it's like on the flag. Like now it's buried in the foundation. You know what I
It's
mean?
your
Or-
handle, it's your avatar on Twitter. And
Yeah.
I do need to jump, but we hit a nice 2.5 hours here. It's going to be a great show, and I think ending on the Stan Haynes almost like the origin story is not a bad way to go out here.
Yeah,
the origin of the luchador.
dude, thank you so much for having me on. And
Sure, I really enjoyed meeting you online. Yeah.
dude,
Thank you for coming on. It's
yeah.
it's an honor, man.
Listen, what you guys are doing is great because DIY psyops come in like many shapes and forms. And even though it is a weird, open-ended, not broadly defined term, like dissident and the new right, and I just think people have to label things they don't understand or things they're afraid of. You know,
Mhm.
I'm not saying we
Absolutely.
should. I'm not saying we should reject that label outright, but it is something that is often laid at our feet by people who would want nothing more than to watch us like pick up pennies ahead of a steamroller. You know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but that being said, it's abundantly clear that you strike a chord with people, and others pick up what you put down. If not just by virtue of the guests you've had on, but like Dan, people like tell you they fuck with your shit, and let's be
yeah.
honest, like it's a very empowering thing because that makes you go, all right, it was a good idea to go forth with this, right?
Absolutely.
All
Yeah. I
right.
mean, when you like hear validation in meat space, it reminds you that this thing you're doing on the internet is real. And
Absolutely.
Right.
that's some good shit.
So fellas, thanks for having me on. It was a blast.
Sure thing.
Thank you for coming on.
Yep. You both have a great rest of your Saturday. I'm gonna stop recording.